This Scotsman is redefining the mountain bike industry. Reece Wilson has never been one to play it safe. Born and raised in Scotland with a background in motocross, he set his sights on one goal, becoming the UCI Downhill World Champ. In 2020, that goal became a reality when Reece won the UCI World Championship.
Like I said before, it was happening so easy. It was just, I wasn't even trying, it felt like.
But success didn't mean an easy road. The highs were massive, but so were the lows. Yet, Reece's hunger to win is still strong, and his pursuit of World Cup podiums and victories continues. In 2025, he's taking his biggest leap yet, betting on himself and launching his own team, AON Racing.
Well, if there's nowhere else you want to be, there's one option, that's make your own team. I definitely didn't realise how big it was.
The world of downhill racing has been swept with the winds of change, and with this theme in mind, Reece has left his old team of 7 years and any semblance of convention. Even his bike has been turned upside down. Upside down forks, a gearbox instead of a derailleur, a belt instead of a chain, all drive the steed Wilson will take into battle in 2025. Gypsy Gang, welcome Reece Wilson to the podcast.
I met a gypsy.
Reece Wilson, welcome to Gypsy Tales, mate. I'm frothing on this one.
Yeah, me too, man. It's I've been telling a few friends and family recently that we're coming on this podcast, and everybody's like, "What? The Gypsy cast?" And obviously, this last week or two for us has been just Gypsy content everywhere. So, yeah, pretty buzzing to be on when the wave's up. So, thanks for having me, and cheers for the listeners for tuning into this one.
Nah, dude, it's kind of good timing for you too. Like, you've got a bunch of different cool stuff going on, and you're in a pretty interesting time in your career, and I feel like we've been talking about doing this for a long time too. So
yeah, I've been a fan of the Gypsy podcast for a long time, and obviously a fan of motocross since forever. So as soon as you started getting the top MX guys on, it was like tuning in straight away because you get a lot, obviously, you know yourself, you get a lot more information out of people when you're on a one-to-one conversation in comparison to what you can get just watching the Supercross live feed. So yeah, I've been a massive fan of the podcast for a long time, and if you'd asked me 2 or 3 years ago, that would have been on this, I wouldn't have believed you. So yeah, pretty epic to be here. Like you say, it's a lot happening in my life recently, so should have plenty to talk about.
You're a bit of a moto ripper too, eh?
Yeah, I had my whole life. Dad got me on one when I was probably 5 years old, racing from 6, and pretty much the standard moto kids lifestyle, like every single weekend, packing up the van, trying to get away from school early, turning up to school on a Monday, absolutely written off after doing 6 motos over the weekend. Like that was my life all the way up until 16, 17 years old, basically, and then yeah, the realization of there's probably not that much money in this sport in the UK, and the grind is real. The opportunities were kind of moved to the US or go to Belgium, become homeschooled, and join the grind of. I was actually in Ben Watson's category growing up. So he was initially, when I first started British motocross, he was pretty much lapping me. Kind of halfway through a moto, he'd come past me. You could smell his race gas, just like just on the limit. And me as a kid, just be like, whoa. And everybody in the UK saying, he's going to be the top guy. And if you're getting lapped by the top 85cc in the nation, you're probably not going to make it professionally. Maybe in hindsight, I could have done it. I feel like I maybe could have done a bit more with motocross, but I was quite a reserved kid at that age. I didn't really mature until I was really 18, 19 into being strong enough and confident enough to really throw a motocross bike around. And now it's hindsight's a hell of a thing, isn't it? It's 20/20 vision. But looking back, I do wonder, like, if I had went down that road, being a mindset to be a champion, I think similar in any sport. So when I managed to become a world champion in downhill, I was like, could I have done that in motocross? But hey, who knows? The world of woulda, coulda, shouldas, eh?
Well, it's funny you say that, like you definitely don't. I feel like once you've reached a certain level in one thing, you understand what it takes, and you can look back on all the other things that you didn't end up becoming like super high level at, and you're like, I kind of just didn't apply this formula, because I feel like greatness in anything is a formula,
I mean, it's what's the saying, the 10,000 hours theory, right? We're all bone, we're all flesh, and we all can eat the same food. So your upbringing is for sure a massive part of your mental mindset and how you approach life. But I'd think physically we're all actually pretty close to each other. And like you say, if you can put 10,000 hours of jiu-jitsu, 10,000 hours of motocross, 10,000 hours of rally car driving, you will be one of the best in the world at that sport, you know. And the earlier you can do that in your life, the better it is, you know, whilst you've got no responsibilities and you're just a young kid with nothing but confidence and your bones are made of rubber. And that for me was as simple as that. I was handed bicycles and motorbikes from day one, you know, earlier than I actually have memories for. So by the time I was 16 years old, I'd already competed as a professional athlete for 10 years, you know, on mountain bikes. So it's no coincidence that you're really good at riding bikes with all of those days and hours riding bikes, you know. So yeah, for sure, if I just kept going at the motocross journey, who knows where I could have ended up. But you know yourself, it's a ruthless sport. Not that I've chose one that's a whole lot easier. I've actually been injured way more racing downhill than I ever was in motocross. But yeah, just at that age, and I just kind of lost the love for it. It started getting a bit too aggressive. I wasn't really enjoying it. And motocross, when you're not enjoying it, is extra hard. You know, you really feel like you're swimming. It's a grind. So yeah, I just got to the age where I thought, kind of 16, 17, you're getting into cars, you're leaving school. I think everybody's a bit lost at that age. You're getting pressure from social pressure, maybe family pressure, and like, well, what are you going to do with your life? And I was looking at like Scottish motocross results, being like, okay, yeah, probably not much I can do with that, you know. So yeah, is what it is.
It's one of the big cultural differences. Like the more time that I live in America, the more I wonder whether just like the cultural difference of Scotland, Australia, the UK, like here, man, everyone believes in themselves and their kids to this crazy, crazy level, right? Like the amount of kids that kind of suck at moto that are getting homeschooled on like you wonder if how much of it is just that, is that the parents just believe in their kids. I mean, it was the same for me. Like when I was racing downhill, my dad was like, this is the dumbest fucking sport in the world. And I'd go do like a state championships or a national championships. And he's like, this sport sucks, bro. I see you for 2 seconds and I have to climb up a massive hill. Like this is literally the worst. And you've got kids over here being like, you're going to be a world champion, Jimmy. You know, like there's such a cultural difference between, you know, where I would say where I come from or where we come from and like the American kind of, you know, the American culture, the American dream.
Yeah, for sure. I do wonder, like in the UK way, the weather's a massive part and people like just less outdoor sport, I think, in general. But for sure, like as a UK person going to America, specifically, let's say California, you land there and it's just like everybody's living in this land of like make-believe happiness, and it almost seems fake. It's like it's tough as a UK person. You're like, wait a minute, are you joking with me right now? Because like you look too happy, because we're used to walking around the streets and people like you know, they won't even look at you in the UK right now. It's like everybody's just either on a phone or looking at their feet or kind of scolding at you. You know, it's like it definitely feels like I wouldn't say a most pressured environment, but yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. It's like it feels different. And
for sure,
I think Europe's like that, but then you go to New Zealand and nobody's wearing any shoes, the sun's shining, they're sitting on the beach at lunchtime, smacking back beers. You're like, this is just different. We might as well be on a different planet right now. So that's definitely something to be said for that.
Yeah, but I wonder, like, no, first of all, you're so right. It's just crazy the difference. And my wife's Eastern European, so like where she comes from, I mean, she has this, like, she says, if you smile without a reason, people look at you like you're a crazy person. And here, all it is fake smiles, and the whole place is just like smiling, small talk, hi. And it just has such a big impact. But there's got to be a flip side of that, right? Like the determination, riding in the mud, the grit. You know, if you actually can bust through whatever like atmosphere or like gravity that kind of like wants to bring you back down to earth, if you actually can bust through that as someone from the UK or Russia or wherever it is that's like a cold, hard place, there's got to be some extra points that you get on top of that, right?
Hey man, for sure. It's, I guess, resistance training is what you're talking about, right? You train in environments that are way harder than you're racing. You know, that is true. It's in the UK, it never gets any harder than kind of mid-January, mid-February for us. You're trying to cycle a bike up a hill on your own in 6 inches of snow. The snow's going sideways. You know, this half of your face is just freezing off, like, and nobody's going to get out there and pedal your bike for you, and it sucks. And then you arrive at like the first or second round of the year. You're in Europe. It's 25 degrees. You're wearing the same kit for 3 days. Life's easy. It feels like you're on holiday after that. So there's definitely swings and roundabouts, and I think a bit of reverse psychology in certain scenarios are really good. Trick yourself into making yourself do a thing a hard way, because it's only going to get easier after that. And yeah, for sure, easy routes out never normally lead to great places. So yeah, I'm very thankful for where I've been brought up. I love Scotland. I love the weather. And for us, maybe worldwide weather actually seems to be getting more wet race seasons than ever before. As previous, like at least half our races now will be wet. And I remember back in kind of 2015 to 17, it was a wet race was rare. So the world seems to be getting a little bit wetter, and I'm all for that from where I'm from. So yeah, nothing against it.
Yeah, you're just out there doing rain dances before every practice.
It's true, literally.
So what bike are you riding these days? You had a 350, didn't you?
I did. I had a 350 Husky, 2019. Absolutely loved that bike.
Yeah.
Got all kit out.
Good vintage.
Oh, it was class. It was so good. I had a 250, a KTM 250 before that. I think I got a 16. Hated it. I don't know if you ever had this, but sometimes you get a bike and just day one you sit on it, it's foreign. It just didn't feel right. Nothing about it felt right, and I crashed my brains out on that thing. Like the very first day I was out on it, I remember I had one of the biggest crashes I've ever had on a motocross bike. Like one of those you get up from going, I should not be okay. And it just led on to more and more and more crashes. And it got to the point where I lost respect for the bike. You know, like the plastics would be cracked and hanging off it. And I'm like, I'm not even spending any money on that. It's like, you don't deserve it. I'm just going to sell it. And at that point, again, in Scotland, everything's like sand tracks pretty much. That's all we have over here. It's like deep, wet sand. Obviously, Sean Simpson, he's won an MXGP in Lommel. So like, or Lommel, however you want to pronounce that, probably still wrong. So we've got plenty of sand tracks here, and I kind of got good enough to be ringing out a 250, like just overworking it, having to change oil all the time, and didn't really want to worry about a piston. So I thought a 350, listen to yourself and a few other people being like, if you're not flat out on moto, 450 is probably too much. So I was like, right, I'll get the 350. And I had that thing from 2019 till, what did I have it, 3 or 4 years, I think. Never put a piston in it, just changed oil, kind of looked after it well, and the thing ran mint. And it felt like an attachment of me, you know, it really got me, probably progressed me on that bike more than any other bike I've ever had. Like really enjoyed that thing. So it was good. And then it got a bit old, and I actually got an ex-race bike off of Sean Simpson. And that surpassed that again. Dude, that guy can set up bikes. Like his dad does the WP suspension, and you give him your weight, and he has all that. You know, it's nothing fancy in comparison to what your top guys are doing. But just for your average man to go and get a bike that you'll have a setup that just works on every track, pretty solid all year long. And they nailed it. Like I loved that bike. For the very first corner I hit on it, I was like, this is just perfect. The power was beautiful. It wasn't too much, but yeah, great bike. 450? It is, yeah. I think it's just stock, but I think he maybe said he had a lighter, could he have a lighter conrod in it or something? It was like, there was something in there, but he said it's nothing crazy to add more power. He said, if anything, it's just to mellow it out. So it's not quite as punchy. And now it's, like I say, my motocross in the last, up until the injury I had in 2013, up to that point, I was really getting on, you know. I was racing with some of the Scottish guys that were getting top threes, and John Adamson, who's now raced a few MXGPs and doing really well in the UK national stuff. Me and him would have some battles. I could maybe hold on to him for a lap or two. I was like, oh, getting it again, you know, it's in there somewhere. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the 21 450.
I remember seeing videos of you riding. I was like, Jesus, dude, this guy's actually insanely legit.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, honestly, pretty much all credit to my dad. My dad was, you know, the moto dad. I'm sure in America they're like almost highlighted in America, the crazy moto dad. So same in the UK. Normally big bellies, a can of beer at like 9 a.m. They're screaming at the kids, you know, go faster, like just crazy stuff. And my dad was always the one at the side of the track doing this, like stand up. You know, I'm riding around in like last place or first place, it wouldn't matter. His only advice was stand up. And he would like show me videos of Stefan Everts and like my dad had a really nice style on a bike too, so we never practiced jumps ever. And jumps are probably the one thing that stopped me from like going professional, because I was an absolute wuss. As soon as they got rutted out or got a kicker on them, I just wouldn't jump anything. But we spent like 6 years of my life in stubble fields, just making our own tracks, corners for show, jumps for show, corners for dough type of deal. And I was like bar dragging things on 85s like just every other day. My cornering was so good, feet on the pegs, like beautiful style, but it was just never really that fast. So yeah, I've worked a lot though. I care a lot about technique, and I care a lot about how I look on a bike. So I'm not like, you have a style, but everybody can work on it and everybody can change. And the Jet Lawrence, like feet in on the toes, hips, all the hinging at the hips, weight off the hands. Yeah, as soon as I saw that, I was like, my dad's been telling me this for years. Like that's the way to ride a moto. So yeah, I appreciate you noticing.
No, I notice. It's it's funny, like the style, you definitely can work on it. Like I thought, especially riding mountain bikes as a kid, so that's where I started.
Right, okay.
Before I had I rode the Peewees and stuff like that, but I had a really bad crash when I was like 6, perforated my bowel, had to have almost died from it. And
wow.
A guy swung open a car door. Like he parked next to we were riding in this grass field track, and a guy just fucking swung open his door as I was coming past right on the track, and then I turned and the handlebars went. So anyway, kind of killed my moto career as an early kid, and then I got a downhill bike, and I never had the best style, but you couldn't film yourself, you couldn't really we didn't have cameras, you don't really know what you're doing. But as I got older, as you start to see yourself ride and you start to work on it and you put in the time, and you really can kind of change and develop, but you have to commit to it and go slow.
That's it.
Doing it. I think 2019 I went to Townley's in New Zealand, and that was the first time where he was like, you got to get on your toes, you got to get on your toes. And I feel like I didn't use my back brakes for 2 years.
It feels like it's in another postcode when you're reaching for it with your toe.
Yeah. And it's that's how hard you have to commit to changing technique and style. And now my big thing is trying to soften my elbows, which I feel like I do naturally on a mountain bike, but not on a moto. For whatever reason.
That's pretty. Normally it's the opposite, because downhill's pretty much all through your arms.
Yeah, well, it's been sick actually. We got trails at where I live now, and there's some pretty cool rough kind of, just near all the Laguna trails, and I don't know if you've ever ridden them, but I'm going through the rougher sections, and I'm just all right, loose elbows, bro, loose elbows, But yeah, can't do it on a moto. Just fucking death grip that.
That's the thing. Yeah, well, that's the thing on a motocross bike. It's trying to pull your arms off, so you're it's more of the physical is more a pulling motion. So you're actually trying to just keep yourself on the tank. But whereas a downhill, you're kind of always resisting and always pushing. And at the same, when you're trying to learn something new, then you're thinking about it. And as soon as you start thinking, well, it's game over. Your speed has to drop, because your computing power is already being taken up by, like you say, do this, do that, and you become robotic. So all these new techniques, they don't feel better at all initially. In fact, they feel worse. You feel like you're going 2 steps back. But you kind of have to do that. It's the process of changing something, and the longer you've done the thing the wrong way, the longer it's going to take to undo it, which again, why coaching for the younger kids to get them to do things the right way is so important. But also not being a coach teaching the wrong things is a tough one too, because you're instilling those bad habits. It's a tough balance, but yeah, being technique wins every time.
So you mentioned you had that bike that you just hated. My version of that was a 2009 KX 250F. Fucking hated that bike, bro. I was so excited because that was the PC era,
Yeah.
And that bike was the biggest piece of shit. I was working for a magazine at the time. And so it was a magazine bike. I literally just left that bike in a friend's shed, and I was like, I don't give a fuck what happens to this thing. He worked for the magazine as well, so I knew it would get back to where it needed to go. But I was just I never want to see this bike again. I fucking hate it. I broke a collarbone 2 collarbones and a wrist on that bike.
Yeah, honestly, you can't explain it. It's genuinely like they're cursed. You do get that. I actually had a trail bike a few years ago. The same thing, like brand spanking new custom paint job. Looking at it like this is, oh, what a dream, you know. First day out on it, nearly threw it in the river before I put it in the van. I was like, I'm just gonna leave. I'm gonna leave the fucking thing here. Like, I don't even want to take it home. What a waste of space. And you can't explain
just
it.
Was spitting you off?
Yeah, like it just, I don't know, it just didn't, nothing felt right about it when you're riding down. I just couldn't get it to do what I wanted it to do, trying to set up the suspension, fiddling with different things, and it just never felt, it just never had one of those days where like you're thinking and the things are just happening. It was always something happening and then me reacting to it, and it just never felt like I was in charge, you know, and that was only on a bicycle. But yeah, motorbikes, the one day I had a motorbike, I was like, this is no place to be feeling uncomfortable. Just get this thing sold.
Oh, yeah, no, I get that. So, have you been following the Supercross season so far this year?
Religiously. We've got a little wagers on. We're putting our 1, 2, 3 every single weekend. You got to get your results in before Saturday night. Make your predictions, and I think we've got like 5 points, 10 points, 15 points, and we're going to do a point tally throughout the whole season. So yeah, religious watcher of Supercross. I've not missed a minute so far. Hell of a season.
What do you make? What's your take?
I have Tomac down for the overall. I'll put that out there right now.
Before or after the Jet Lawrence news?
That was before. That was before we had watched a single moto. We had to. That was the rule. So I thought that if the man's truly having a last season with how he was riding off season and some of his pre-race stuff, I was like, that man is on a new level. Like I'm putting him down as this. He's got to be the guy, or at least one of the guys. And then, of course, once the racing gets going, the first 3 rounds, it's a pick and mix. It's literally a lottery between the top 10 guys. Whoever gets the start, whoever's in the top 3 to 5 have pretty much been the guys. The rides from the back of the pack that Chase has had, Eli has had, are some of the most historic rides in history. I think it's such a shame that you don't get them televised all the way through. But without a doubt, you're watching those guys like you're watching the tally of riders on the live feed when you're watching it, and like 2-3 riders a lap on tracks that there's just nowhere to pass. And then they get to like that top 15 mark, and the charge from 15th, let's say, to 5th is just, how are they passing those guys? You know, it's like, oh, it's been insane. It's some year. This is probably the highest caliber of season I think I've seen in the last, got to be 5 maybe.
Oh, man. And, dude, qualifying has just been the most insane shit. Like, San Diego, I don't know if you saw my story, but I'm, like, sitting in the press box, and I'm, like, filming the TV. It's got Jet at a, like, 4.531. Yeah. Chase 4.532, and I'm just like, what? Wait, so we're just doing thousandths of a second now on a fucking minute long? Is that what we're doing, guys?
Yeah.
All 3 of them within 1,000th of a second. It was one of the most mind-blowing things I've ever seen. And like A1, dude, you should have heard the crowd when Tomac. So Jet, he's notorious for doing his last lap heater. Like he has such a talent for being the last guy across the finish line. And when he went number 2 and stayed number 2, the crowd lost their shit.
I'd have been one of them for sure. And at the same time, you're watching these laps. Like, I pretty much sat and watched every qualifying session, like race day live as well. It's nice this time of year for us. We're still off season. There's not any pre-racings happening. So through January, February and into March, we can pretty much watch everything. So I've been absolutely glued to it. And every qualifying lap, multiple times you're like, whoa, like just the way Tomac's throwing bikes around. Like, he lands off, he's 3 bike lengths away for the corner and he's already almost 90 degrees on the back brake, just like sliding in, all clutch, doesn't even change gear. Just nuts, man. Honestly, those guys are. And then Jet does the same thing whilst looking like he's, month of Sundays. Not even trying. But like upsloping everything, and the bike's just carrying so much speed, but it's almost like his body's upright the entire time, whereas Anderson can have his left boot above his head with his right elbow below his right knee, coming out of a corner, seat bouncing, and they're all still, like you say, within 1,000th of a second now. I don't think the sport's ever seen it. It's going to be a hell of a year at the end.
Oh man, it's crazy. What do you make of the news about Jet yesterday?
Devastating. I remember having a conversation with Andrew Chandro, who was part of our team, like athlete manager, and obviously the Jet come up a year or two ago. He's like, "That's it, man. It's done. The sport's over. Jet's just gonna walk away," you know. And I thought, absolutely not, man. Sport has shown us this time and time again. The journey up will be met with a journey down, and sometimes it's up and all the way down. Sometimes it's gradual. But there's ups and there's downs, and there's no way you can do that sport for that long and not have something like that happen, because it's very rarely the rider's fault as well, right? In Supercross, it's a tough block in your way, it's somebody jumping the opposite way in the track, it's a start crash. That was completely out with Jet's control. They had no option there, you know. It's like somebody moves across in front of you on a motocross bike in a tight space like that. Natural instinct, you put a leg out, and that is 101 on how to do an ACL, is exactly what Jet done. You just plant the foot like that, and yeah, so in a sense, no surprise. I never wish it on anybody, but I've been there enough myself now. It's like injuries are just, it's not if, it's when. And for Jet, it was like he's had 2 or 3 insane seasons, you know, history-breaking seasons. It's like that's going to be met with a down eventually. So he's young. Surgeries these days are insane for ACLs. You can pretty much pop one out in 3 months and you're good to go again. He'll be absolutely fine. He'll be back swinging for outdoors, I'm sure. But yeah, what a bummer. It's definitely made our selection for the races at the weekend a little bit easier, though, because he was one of the guys in there, you know.
Yeah. Has there ever been a moment in downhill where you get a guy come into the class, maybe it's from juniors, that elevates the level, almost catches everyone off guard, and then year 2, when you think it's going to be just over, like your buddy was saying, where it's like, it's done now, you know. But then everyone sees the level, has time in the off season to adapt, raises to the level, and you get those super competitive years.
Absolutely. I think it's crazy now. Certainly with our sport, you're getting kind of 16, 17, 18-year-old kids are racing in junior. And Jordan Williams, for example, in, what was this, 2020... don't quote me on the year, somewhere between 21 and 23, he came from, and he was obviously racing Jackson Goldstone. They had one of the most ridiculous junior seasons, just 1 and 2 all year long. It was absolute madness, and their times, I think, were in the top 5 at some races for the elite male. A little bit uncomparable because they would race like 3 or 4 hours earlier than us.
A bit earlier.
The track would get a fair bit more. Like, it was hard to say, but regardless, you can tell they were going to come into elite and be qualifying guys and fighting for top 10s instantly. And Jordan Williams came to round 1 as a first ever elite race and smoked us all, you know. Stood on the podium, number 1.
Right.
And everybody went, oh my days, this is it. Jackson and Jordan are just going to walk away with this. And then Jordan ended up dabbing a foot that season, kind of that high. It's the same, I guess, it happens in all sports. You win a championship or something, it's like that motivation kind of drops off because you've just achieved your goal. So if you don't reset a goal like instantly, you can spend a bit of time in just no man's land where you're kind of trying to enjoy the success you've just had, but also trying to refocus to do it again. It can be a challenge. And you could tell with Jordan, he was stunned. You know, life stunned him. He was stood there going, how's this happened? And it took him months really to get back to the pace that he should have been. And then unfortunately he dabbed his knee, same as Jackson, didn't even crash, same as Jet, didn't even crash, just dabbed the knee and done an ACL, and that was him out for the year. So to go from that to that again, and now this season he's going to be coming in trying to build from the bottom again. And Jackson was the same. He went on to dominate, almost like had a pretty insane season with some amazing race wins, and then went to Madeira at the start of last year and done an ACL. So that fundamentally is what slows these kids down. Like you have an age, we all know this, where you're made of rubber, and it gets to, let's say, 20 to 25, depending on your genetics, where that stops happening, and when you hit the ground, things start breaking, and it's unavoidable. And those are the fundamental things in sport that slow you down. That's the thing that starts to play with your head. You're trying to come back and race, but it's my first race back, I'll go easy. You know, you're trying not to get injured. Kind of like what I said before, you start thinking, and once you start thinking, it's the flow's gone and it's kind of over. So you don't truly know how a junior athlete's going to fully develop through their career I don't think until they've done 2 or 3 seasons in an elite and fundamentally went through a big injury, like something really major that takes them out for longer than 3 or 4 months, because the fear of the crash is one thing, the fear of the recovery and happening again, home pressures, team pressures. Mate, there's so much, you know yourself, there's so much mentally that goes into sport. It's the stuff we see on the TV is like the tiniest percentage of what's actually going on in an athlete's life, and why their performance is what it is on a particular weekend. You know, it's a mystical thing.
No, it's so true. And do you think that there's something about when competitors see that level get raised? Like, what is it where I've spoke about this recently, like Billy McKenzie, 2010 or whatever it was, in Australia, comes over, completely smokes everyone, and then 2 rounds later, the guys are there. And it's almost like they just saw a new level, saw what was like their baseline of reality just got kind of like, just shifted up a little bit. And is that a real thing that happens? Like, you see a Jackson Goldstone and you're like, all right, that was a 5-minute 15. Like, okay, that's what's on the table. Like, that's what I can extract from this track. And then you can just do it. Is that what makes you guys so elite, do you think?
I think it's different in downhill. Motocross for me was always the easiest sport when it, like, let's be honest, that second place. You've got enough pace, but number one's right in front of you. It's as simple as brake half a meter later. Like, you can physically see where the guy's braking, so you just need to brake a little bit easier. You can see where he's letting off the throttle a little bit more, and you can inch in so easy on a motocross bike. On a downhill bike, you don't have anything. You've got your own perception of how fast you're going, and that's it. We can't race other people down the hill with us. So there's runs in my life where I've been approaching the finish going, oh my God, I've smashed this, and you're nowhere. Like, you're not even in the top 20. So you're like, well, what happened there? You know, you're back to the drawing board again. There's no real answers. And when you try and watch the race back, 90% of the time we're all in the same line. Nobody's got a crazy line on the track. It's not a motocross track where it's 20 or 30 feet wide. We're racing normally on a track that come race day is 6 inches wide for 4 minutes. You know, and you have to be on that line. And if you're off that line, you're just hemorrhaging time. So it's not as simple in downhill at all as just watching a race back and going, oh well, he just done that, so I'll just do that. It's like all the gains and advantages are so minute in downhill that the naked eye can't actually see them. And I do believe in downhill, it's what's between the ears. It's where you are mentally, and if you're super happy with your team, your body's good, your home life's good, everything with a girlfriend's good, like all of these things is fundamentally what leads to a guy's energy and confidence and ego just being at a perfect size, where he doesn't overdo it, but he's confident enough to send it a little bit, you know, just be overly confident with himself. And those are normally, in my experience, those have been the weekends for me that it's just been, I've been so confident after track walk. I'm like, yeah, I'm winning this thing. I've not changed my bike. I don't know what anybody else is doing. It just goes right, you know, something just works for you. So downhill has not been dominated since 2012. Aaron Gwent was probably the only guy to do it. Yeah, he had some race seasons where it or some races where he was beating guys by like 6 seconds, which at the time was, we might never see that again in our sport. So, the juniors, I think the juniors are for sure getting faster earlier, but the top level guys are just the top level guys. You know, the junior guys can get to that level, but it's in downhill, there's not this massive quantum leap that somebody can just do one weekend and then not have the next. From history, maybe it'll change. I'd love to try myself, you know, with bikes and tech and everything like that. I think there are massive advantages to be made, and we're going to try our best. But can somebody win by 6 seconds again? It seems hard to believe sitting here right now. So time will tell.
No, dude. I mean, this sport, like we were talking. It's funny. Kenny was on the pod the other day, and he said that after racing, he is going to try downhill maybe. And then I was like, do you really think you could qualify for a World Cup? And he's like, yeah, I think so. And it's like, it just made me think like, and you hear, you know, well, there's been people that are like, Jet might just get sick of motocross and go do MotoGP. And I'm just like, have you been to a MotoGP race, brother? Like, these guys are fucking aliens. that are not from this planet. And then amongst those aliens, there's other aliens. I was like, it ain't going to go like that. And I feel like sport across the board. I mean, watching gymnastics at the Olympics, it's just like the level that these humans are on is absolutely insane. And it's like, you just wonder what, I mean, obviously sport always progresses, right? But it's just like, it feels like right now, if you're at the top of a sport, 2025, you're basically you've evolved into something more than a human.
That's a hell of a compliment to those people. But I've been saying this for a really long time. You know, I think freestyle motocross is one of the best examples now of, okay, what is next for the human being when it comes to tricks on a motocross bike, like a triple backflip. And then you think, well, what's next? The quadruple backflip. You know, there's surely no way. You know, we're starting to drop from like 10, 15, 20-story buildings just on a rev limit or on a 450. Like you say, that's an alien level activity. It's already getting ridiculous. And I think the same thing. I have times and places on a bike where I go, I'll never do that fast again, ever again. Like that was just almost pure luck, but then I had the skill to hold on to it, sort of thing. But yeah, you are absolutely right. Sport all across the world right now is like, how can we possibly get better as human beings? And then you see some 15-year-old kid, you know, on a motocross bike just hannying, you know, opposite ways, and you're just, right, okay, well, I guess we can get better. You know, I guess we're going to find out where the limit is.
Well, downhill's such a great example of it too. You know, like you watch the top 10 in the elite downhill World Cup, and you watch it in amazement, you know, and when they get the camera angle right and when they get it right to give you a true sense of what you guys are doing, I mean, I really think that is on some next level. Like downhill just squarely fits in that same category as well for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've respected the best sports in the world. I'd say pro bull riding physically is an insane sport. It's only 8 seconds, so you could basically be completely unfit. You never see an overweight guy riding a bull. You know, the guys are clearly fit and strong, but that to me is the most insane sport in the world. Like to strap yourself to a wild bull who's going to try and get you off and kill you if it can. You're a savage if you get on one of them. So I put them way above me. I put them way above motocrossers. But then I look at a motocrosser in downhill, and like I'm good enough level at both to respect and understand what a pro is doing on a bike, even though maybe somebody that's not into the sport can't quite tell. But those, honestly, downhill, the level of accuracy required at the speed we are going at is, I don't think it's comparable really in any other sport. And I have this thing, like everybody has a different perception, right? You're driving down the road in your car and there's some guy doing 40 in front of you and you're like, dude, come on, is that your limit? Like, is the world coming at you so fast that you can't go faster than 40? You know, you get this open highway, you got nothing, there's no trouble here at all. What are you worried about? And then I think it's probably because I go past trees at like, you know, 3 millimeters. I can get to the bottom of a run at an average of 30, 40 kilometers an hour. So you can go past a tree at 60, 70, and I can every single lap clip the end of my handlebar just on selection, going at 60, 70 kilometers an hour. Just chunk, like take the bark off the tree. You know, like that level of precision, as we said before, just from thousands and thousands. There's loads of mountain bikers out there that can probably do it. All of that time spent, that to me is a level of skill and talent that I don't really see in many other sports. And I think our sport, more than most, is one of those that you have to come and see in person. You really have to stand next to the track and feel the ground shaking as a mountain bike, like ba-ba-ba-bong. You know, the rocks are dinging, the bike's shaking, and when you watch a mountain biker in slow motion, like you can see the fingers like bouncing off, like everything. The level of vibration is just nuts on a mountain bike. The hand pump in comparison to a motocross bike's just out of this world. I really do think motocross and downhill they're very, very, very close as far as like how much skill and time is required to get to that top level. So I think that's why we're seeing such a good, and you're doing a great job of this, merging the two sports, because we're so alike. It's insane.
Yeah, and there is, I think, like that mutual respect level you know, and like even a want, you know, for Kenny to say that he wants to do that and he wants to go over and like once he retires and just, I don't think he's like, I don't think he's saying he wants to make a career out of it or whatever. He's going to have enough money to do whatever he wants, you know, but I just, that he's got like a desire and a drive to even try that. It obviously shows like a level of respect of, I actually want to give this a crack and see what I could do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was the same. I don't know if you were a part of it, but Bernard Kerr tried was it the Road to Anaheim or something he called it? I can't remember what he called it. It was something along those lines. Same thing. And, you know, everybody in the UK was like, oh, I think he could actually do it. And I was sat there at home going, listen, I know he's good, and I know he can throw a scrub and he can rail a berm on Instagram, but you have no idea how big those supercross tracks actually are when you're in person. Like, if that guy can get through the whoops once whilst tagging the front wheel off every one, I'll be absolutely amazed. And, you know, sure enough, he was like humbled. You know, obviously AMA were never going to let him in either, but I think he'd even admit it when you actually stand there for the very first time next to a supercross track and a whoop on the TV looks a couple of inches, you know, in comparison, you're stood there and it's like nipple height on me and I'm like 5'10", you know, you're like, there's no way this is what this is actually like. And it's the same for every sport. You really have to be and see it in person. And the fact that Kenny's got enough interest just based on what he's seen online and having a shot on a bikes here and there is really cool. It's proud to say that I'm a part of a sport that attracts people with that much gnarliness in them, you know.
That's cool. So you're saying that you can purposely clip trees full clip on a downhill bike. Like you have that level of spatial awareness of you and your bicycle.
Absolutely, yeah. You could put like a cent coin on top of a can. You could pretty much knock it off with the bottom of the tire. I can clip my feet or put my pedal, just like slide it across the top of a stump maybe when I'm trying to jump something. Like, yeah, the level of accuracy at the speed that we go at is probably something that people don't, like I say, you can't see it with the naked eye. But I'll get to the bottom of my home trails at Innerleithen are known for being really tight. I'll get to the bottom of every single run and I'll have like the green tree marks up my shoulders on both sides, and I'll have bark on the end of bar ends, both sides, almost every single run. And you know the trees when you're coming into it, you know that like I almost need to clip this one and to be close enough to get the apex of the next one type of thing. So yeah, for sure, yeah, we could clip things that close.
That's fucked
It's
up.
nuts. Yeah,
was that something that do you like drill that as a kid, or is it something that it just naturally develops over time, or is that an actual skill that you've put time into?
I mean, I've never put any time specifically. I've never went for like, let's go and clip some trees with a bar end today type training. But just from where like I say, in this place, Innerleithen in the Scottish borders, near Peebles, is my home riding. I'd say that's where I've spent the last 10 years practicing and honing all my skills. And I went to a college course there. So it's all a really natural, super tight, but really fast through the trees style of riding. So you have no choice but to get like really out of shape. So I can move my bike all the way over to an edge, and then when the tree is actually passing the bar end, then you have to move your shoulder. So you're actually riding like, you know, kind of around the trees and around the stumps. Yeah. And it's a super unique form of riding. Like all the World Cup riders now, you say, oh, we've got a race at Innerleithen, they'd be like, yeah, nah, I'm out. Like, it's just preparing to destroy a shoulder at any moment in time. And I've had my fair share, but it's given me that level of accuracy that you can't really get anywhere else unless you just do that specific thing, you know?
That's mental, dude. I was, before when you were talking about how unique downhill is in the sense of you don't have a reference point. Like it's purely just based on your own speed and your own intuition of what fast is. Imagine, let's say, 10 years into the future, Oakley has a set of goggles that has like a ghost of the fastest run in it. And you can actually, like, you can pass that ghost, or the ghost can be just in front of you. Like, can you imagine living in that world?
We literally spoke about this. Me and my friend Max would Sleeper Co. do a lot of. He's got a sim set up in his house, and we do a lot of sim driving. We play a lot of Supercross on the console. We played a lot of Call of Duty as kids, and yeah, that straight away when we went to downhill, we're like, it's so much better when you can follow somebody. If you can get somebody that's like 5 to 10% faster than you, so they're only pulling like a bike length and a half, maybe, you know, every 30 seconds. It's perfect. That's the perfect amount of mountain biking that you can get a tow along. But yeah, in a race run, you're completely blind. So if you had a ghost in your goggle from your lap previous, 100% every single lap you would pip it off. And eventually you would reach a peak where you're head to head with your ghost and it's difficult. But yeah, absolutely would make a difference. But the difficulty in downhill is, like I say, the level of accuracy is, it's actually almost an impossible level of accuracy. Like, you can't really do. I've never had a race run where I've went, that was absolutely perfect. I've never had one. It's like every qualifying lap, you know, jet cases 1 triple. You're doing that minimum, you know, every lap in downhill. You just never feel like the clean one's there because there's so much stuff on the ground and everything's angled in such funny ways that your bike is just dancing all of the time. So you have that window of 6 inches, like I said, but this side of the 6 inches could be like hitting a curb, and the other side's like, you know, just hitting a 10 pence piece. So you have to be on that left side, and if you go a little bit too fast in the section before, it upsets you for that one. So there comes to a point, and I think that's where my style differs from everybody else's. I've got that motocross style where you just kind of hold it wide open and you've got that 10 feet to work in, and as long as you got the confidence to keep the throttle on, trust the bike that'll straighten up, you should be good to go, you know. And that for me is kind of how I approach downhill. There's a lot of guys that will go up there and they'll walk the track for 3 or 4 hours. They're on the hillside just taking photos with their phone, staring at the line like, I need to be on that line. Whereas I'm a bit like, well, there's the apex, so as long as I get from this apex to that apex without touching the brakes, I'm good to go, and I don't really care what I ride over, and I'll set my bike up in order to ride in that way. And that just, it takes a lot of the stress and thinking out of it for me, but it adds a little bit more inconsistency to your final results because I'm maybe not as accurate as the rest. But it's more of a creative way for me to ride because I'm not worrying about being around a route or around this stump. I just keep my eyes up and think, oh, maybe I could double that, and I'll just give it a go one lap and see where I end up. So yeah, I feel like I ride very free, and I think maybe the fans of the sport would kind of agree with that almost. That's kind of how it looks like when I'm watching. I'm a bit all over the place, but in kind of loose surfer way, if you know what I mean.
That whole apex to apex thing, there's a dude who races in Moto America. Well, he's raced like Australian Superbike. He's won so much shit, Troy Herfoss, and he rips on a moto too. And that's his whole philosophy, is coming from road racing. It's just all about the apex. He doesn't ride in any of the ruts that people make. He just goes apex, 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 the whole track, and he fucking rips.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that it's the fastest way to pretty much drive anything. It's average speed will win every form of racing ever. Like, it's the long and short of it. You don't want to have any harsh braking. You don't really want to have any harsh accelerating. You just want to be rolling all of the time. And then in downhill, that's your biggest enemy because we don't have a throttle. You know, your legs are your throttle, and most of the time the ground is so rough that you can't pedal either. So we're basically on 6 or 7 tracks of the year. You leave the start gate, you cannot pedal. So if you make a mistake in a key corner, that's it. It's game over for you. And like you said, it's thousandths of a second. We had a World Cup in 2019 in Leger. A hell of a track, so fast, but just like one dusty moto groove, almost like a sheep track if you went out in like your enduro bikes, all the way down this hill, so fast. And I remember being, I think like 11th place maybe. There was 12 people, I think, 11 or 12 people on the same second, down like a nearly 4-minute track.
Imagine the ghost of that.
That's just, yeah. Imagine when we said that, this is when there was, I think, 60 or 80 guys qualified at the time. We said, imagine, and the whole field that year was in, maybe 3.5, 4 seconds, the finalists. And we said that, imagine a camera down the line of the finish. You know, it would just be one collective group of riders just going through the finish. And all of those different bikes, all of those different body types from all over the world. And it comes down to that. It's just, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really is. So fundamentally, right? So now that I'm been back on the mountain bike a bit and trying to get a little bit quicker, are you every corner trying to make sure that there's no brakes?
Yeah, that is fundamentally the key. Sometimes it's the same as a motocross bike. So in a hard sandy braking bumps on a motocross bike, you'll keep the throttle on and you'll drag the rear brake to load the rear suspension and stop it from bucking. You can hear a motocross bike when somebody's good on one, like you know, it's dragging it. You can use the rear brake in a similar way on a mountain bike, but as soon as that rear wheel locks up, the bike will not stay straight. And if you lose a straight bike in braking, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to change your apex in the corner, and then you'll have to pull an additional set of braking somewhere within that corner. So there are some moments, if the track's steep enough, you can ride the brakes around the corners all you like, and there's other tracks there's like 1 or 2 corners on, and that is the corner. Pretty much everybody's probably going to get to that corner within a second of each other, but the difference between getting that one corner good or bad is 3 seconds, and that's your final result. That's the gap you end up with. So those are the ones that you're like, yeah, you have to get it absolutely perfect. And I guess you'll know yourself almost when you're doing something so good, it becomes such a slow, calm feeling that you lose the feeling of speed. So then you don't feel fast, but you look at the clock and your momentum's good. So it was fast, but it didn't feel it. So in mountain biking, it's the hardest thing. It's those runs that just feel like, fuck man, I probably didn't push hard enough there. I should have went, and you win the race. You know, and that was like me in snowshoe in 2021. I beat Loic Bruni by 0.32 or something. It was nuts. It was, you know, a human hair difference, and it was one of those runs for me that was just like, yeah, that was chill. You know, I could have done that 10 times over. Like I should have went faster, but it wasn't. It was just perfect. You know, I just nailed everything. So yeah, that is a difficult one. But corners in downhill are absolutely everything. It's all corners, entry speed and exit speed.
So no front brake in any corners?
A lot of front brake, actually. A surprising amount of front brake. We have a lot of restrictions in mountain biking with tyre grip. It's probably our biggest, our number one limiting factor is grip. So I have the confidence a lot of times, and I can look at a corner and go, okay, I physically am prepared, confident enough to go into this corner faster, but I just don't have the traction for it. So it's balancing that, like your expectations of what you want to do in this specific section, and being aware and knowing exactly where the limit of your grip is. And then obviously that ties into your suspension and everything else as well. But for us this year, I've just moved to Schwalbe tires recently, and they have a new casing called the radial casing, and it's basically improved the tire contact patch to the ground. And tires are probably the number one improvement that you can make on a mountain bike. If you stuck a cheap tire on and you stuck a really good downhill tire on, it'd be the difference between being on like your clapped out Walmart bike and a Formula One bike or something extreme. That's the type of difference it can make to the ride feel and the overall traction of the bike. So our tire pressure, I mean, some guys will work to within 0.5 of a PSI to get the tire patch as big as humanly possible without actually damaging a rim or a wheel. It's like, yeah, we are on the absolute limit of everything, but the front brake that's your big battle, because you're going down a hill as well. The forks are already loaded pretty much all of the time because it's just gravity and brakes. So you're trying to brake super hard in big holes whilst the front wheel's already down. So you can't use a lot of front brake, but when you do need it, or when you do want to use it, you have to be very, very, very precise with it. Probably similar to the MotoGP guys, like how accurate and modular they need to be on their front brake. They're using it a lot, but it's like precise using, you know. You overdo that thing, you're going down. And it's the same in downhill. When it happens, it's just like you're on the ground before it's even twitched, you know.
So there's no, because in moto, it's a bad habit that I have, would be like dragging the front through turns, because I feel like it, like you said, loads the suspension, and it feels like it forces more weight through the tire. But on downhill or just like mountain biking, you're trying to just go as old school as possible, all the braking done before the corner, slow release, roll through the corner. That's your optimal. Like, you're not trying to drag front brake or anything through the turns.
No, once you've committed to corner lean on the entry, you will not touch a front brake again unless you've got a massive big berm that the bike's super loaded and actually upright on the wall of a berm. Then you can apply some front brake, but it would probably only be because you have a tight corner straight afterwards. And then same as motocross, if you've got your front wheel in a rut and it's in favour, it can't possibly go anywhere, then sure, load up the front brake as much as possible. But that's actually really rare in downhill. Do we get a track that's fresh enough to get soft and rutty? It's normally either like blue groove for a motocross bike or rocks and roots. It's the equivalent of just throwing a whole load of, it's like blending enduro motocross, like arena cross type.
Yeah.
Not arena cross, Billy Bolt's. What's the super enduro?
Yeah, super enduro.
It's like blending super enduro obstacles, but make them out of concrete, you know, and then have a supermoto bike. Like all of those, that's what it would feel like. Just everything washing out on everywhere. Like you're being on an absolute limit of a downhill bike just feels like you're sliding basically all of the time.
So I need to go and ride and work on doing all my braking before the corners and then just letting go. So I'm going to have to go home, slow down a little bit, because right now I'm just trying to send it into everything and I'm just dragging brakes and fucking stabbing the front to try and slow down in every corner basically.
That's exactly it. Yeah, you can, and I mean, I don't know what it's like for amateur mountain bikers, but like I can come into a section and I kind of know, I guess I've ridden on enough bikes with enough tires in enough conditions in enough countries in the world that I can make a very good prediction just by looking at a track. I kind of know straight away exactly how fast I can hit the corner. So for example, in downhill, we'll do 6 runs maybe before we have to do our qualifying LCQ, whatever we call it. So I turned up to Luneville in France this year. I hadn't been to the track the year previous. The first day was like colossal mudder, like you wouldn't believe it. It's absolute carnage. People just sitting on their bums and sliding down the hills, like trying to carry their bikes down. The marshals couldn't stand upright. I done 1 lap in the morning, 1 lap from the top to the bottom, and was screaming with pleasure inside my helmet, like actually coming past people laughing and smiling, like just like old school Scottish motocross. You know, you could go wherever you wanted, just keep the brakes off and just commit to the ruts. Got to the bottom and thought, I can't do that any better than that. The track's only going to get worse. I took my kit off and that was me. So I done 1 run on the first day. Second day, we done 2 laps in the morning and then I was into qualifying. So I'd only done 3 laps of that track and it dried up a fair bit. It was really good. Had a big mistake in my finals and my qualifying ended up 10th and then was second in finals. So I done 5 laps of that track and then got second place at a World Cup. You know, it's like, imagine Tomac or Jet going out and only doing 5 laps and then lining up for the main. It's like it almost doesn't happen, you know, it doesn't exist. So, but in downhill, you can get away with that. Like I say, with your, or I feel like I can, you know, I knew straight away the track was only going to get worse. It wasn't going to get better for me. It was the best run I could have possibly done. My ego was in the perfect place. I knew I could win the race. So I thought, yeah, let's just sit here and enjoy it. Let's relax, get some food, have a drink, get warm, and just waited. So pretty insane that's possible to do in mountain biking, you know?
Yeah. Dude, it's funny. I've got 2 e-bikes at the moment. And I got one that's a little bit clapped out. It's just a loaner, a little bit clapped out, older kind of tires. And then all the trails here, we hadn't had rain in 6 months. Super slick, super sandy and like just pretty shit conditions for traction. And then I'd been riding this bike with pretty old tires. And then I got a new bike with brand new tires. They were Continental tires, never ridden on them before. Dude, the amount of difference in traction was phenomenal. Like, actually couldn't believe it.
Yeah. You can almost hear it. Like you can feel it and you can hear it, the difference between a good tire and a bad tire. It's like you lean into a corner and it starts that Velcro sound super early and it gives you so much more confidence. Like, for sure, anybody out there, check your tires. You wouldn't put wood on your car as tires, you know, and that's what some cheap mountain bike tires might as well be made of, you know. So go and make sure you got good tires on your bikes, because it does make a big difference. It's funny you say that as well. Laguna in the summer, 6 months of no rain is one of the worst places in the world, in my opinion, to ride a bike. That sand on top of like that horrible sandy rock is just deadly.
Well, we finally had some rain, and it was the first time that I got to ride these trails. And bro, I got home from the ride, and my tires were clean. The dirt was so perfect, it didn't even stick to the tires. It was crazy, and the traction was ridiculous.
It almost makes the tires matte, right? You can turn up with a bike with dirty tires on it, go and ride for the day, and it's like somebody's taken a little bit of like Scotch-Brite or sandpaper and like rubbed the tire down. It takes all of the oil that's from the manufacturers off them, and it leaves them like, it's abrasive stuff. You get like one day riding Laguna and my rear tire's gone. It's crazy.
I'll text you a photo of it. It's exactly what you just said.
Yeah, they look bald. Bald and matte and colour.
So you are making some big changes this season. The whole sport, there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of different stuff that we can talk about right now in your world. But probably one of the more exciting things for you is some of the changes that you've made. So started your own team essentially with a completely new bicycle and a whole new concept. So I don't know where you want to start with that, but I'm pretty keen to hear about it.
Yeah, no, you're bang on. Anybody watching wondering what is on the hat, that is the team name, AON Racing. So I was with Trek Factory Racing for 7 years. Pretty much was kind of going to retire previous to that into end of 2017. Had a massive breakout year in 2018. Got my first podium. Had a 7th place at Val di Sole. And Trek at this moment in time had decided to start their own race team again. Now, they had teams before that are privately managed, so it's just supplying the team with bikes basically and products. So a much easier way to run a team. And then Trek kind of stopped that when people moved on, and Aaron Gwynn actually moved on. He took his management with him. That all changed, and Trek weren't really on the scene for a few years. And then they decided to start a factory race team, and they called me up in 2018 and said, we want to be on it. And I had my school passwords as TWR11 for like my whole childhood, because I wanted to be on Trek World Racing, So when I received that phone call, I had made it, it was like, that was it. I've done it. I've completed it, And the first year, 2019, wasn't great. 2020 was insane. I was world champion. Went to the next again race, the next again weekend, qualified like 3 seconds up in the peeing rain, and this place at Maribor was like, in my head I was set to just, and it was, like I said before, it was happening so easy. It was just, I wasn't even trying, it felt like. So I was kind of in my mind prepared to go and dominate that season and just let the ego get out the box. Had a stupid crash, and that led to 21 being an amazing season as well. I kept the momentum going. 22 was kind of okay, and then 23 I had the big injury. So I kind of got going again this last year from that, but it was like a real incline at the start of that contract, and the last bit just tailed off. And it's funny, I've thought a lot about it. RV was on this podcast, right? And he stayed at Pro Circuit like pretty much his whole career, like a good 7 years of it in the 450s. And he said he wished, it was one of his biggest regrets, was not moving. And for me, 7 years is a really long time. And I don't think I really realised how normal your surroundings get over that period of time, because you're doing the same, you're going to the same races. We stayed in the same hotels for pretty much 7 years. You roll into town, you're with the same people in the van, you sleep with the same people, you're on the same bike, you're pulling the same kit on. It started to get just monotonous, I guess, and I didn't realize it was happening really until now when I've moved away. But I think that's really fundamentally what happened. I was getting a little bit bored. I wasn't really setting new goals, and yeah, it just got stagnant, to be honest. I was looking at other places going, look at that bike, I really want to try that, or fuck, that kit looks really cool, I wish I could try that. And I was just starting to, that side of me was just starting to come out. So for this season, we started talking with Paul, my management company, Net Performance. A couple of years ago, I said, I'm looking around here, man, and I don't really see any team I want to be on. There's really no English teams. There was kind of one English team that I thought the bike was as good as everyone else, but there was never really an opening there. So yeah, I've looked around and thought, well, if there's nowhere else you want to be, there's one option, that's make your own team. And I remember when I said it to Paul, and he was like, I could see on his face going, wow, that's a really big job, man. That's going to be big. And then kind of halfway
that's
through this year,
brother.
he was watching. Oh, it's a big tube, yeah. And I don't think I realised at the time. I definitely didn't realise how big it was. Like, fuck it, it's just me and my dad in a van, man. Generator will be fine.
Yeah,
How hard
can't be that hard.
Yeah, it's not what you're talking about. So yeah. Anyway, halfway through the year, he could see it on my face. He was like, "This guy needs out of here. Like, we've not really got a choice here. We need to do it." And as you've just said, the amount of change that's happening in our industry at the moment is just crazy, really, to be honest. And a lot of it, so much of it, which is maybe another topic, has been negative, which has been really, really tough to see from the outside, because when does negativity ever help any situation, ever? At very least, you can try and be positive about it, you know? So I've been trying to be positive, and then, of course, we set out to start our own team, and probably the worst off-season to date for the industry. So me and Paul are sat there, like, I've already committed to leaving Trek. We hadn't really got anything fully set out yet, and yeah, the pressure was on, but as they say, pressure makes diamonds, and we left ourselves, we put our back against the wall and really left ourselves with no option. I wasn't going to be happy anywhere else unless I got to do my own thing. So we bit the bullet, we sucked it up, and we started the task of building a team from pretty much scratch. So the first thing I done was approach a Swiss bike brand called Gamux, as the Europeans would say. And this guy called Pascal with his brother Domi have this bike since 2019, basically. And I have, as well as probably every other professional racer on the circuit, watched that bike come past and practice, just going, oh, I want to go on that, you know. And it's like a real small brand that would never be able to give the budget to a factory team. So it's like one of those boutique bike brands that's just out there, way better than the rest. But because they're not a massive brand with loads of funding behind them, they'd kind of never really get to ultimately where they wanted to go. So it was almost like it landed on my lap at once. I was like, I'm going straight to those guys. I sat on the bike in Leger, and I mean sat on the bike, like just sat down, put my hands on the handlebars, and it was like the scene out of Avatar where they plug themselves into the dragon, you know. I was just like, oh, this is the feeling, like this is it. It just felt like a moto. The front end was high, bars and everything, the roll was set right. And yeah, I just bounced around in it a couple of times in the car park. It had the belt drive, so no derailleur, electric shifting. Just like, okay, this is already a different sport. So pretty much shook Pascal's hand there and then on the spot. He's obviously like, what is happening, you know? And that was the moment in time we committed to that. I said, right, if I've got a bike, the rest we can worry about later, you know? And the rest we have worried about. And we've spent a lot of time over the last kind of 3-4 months just trying to rack up as many sponsors as we can. And that's been difficult too, because the whole reason I wanted to do this was to get the best of the best, no compromises. And sometimes the best of the best doesn't have budget, you know. And in fact, most of the time it's probably the same as the motocross industry. The budget's in the places that don't, it's not well utilised. And it's very similar in our sport. So I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and honestly, it's turned out amazing. I've pretty much got the bike built from top to bottom exactly how I want it, with the people around me, amazing teammates. It's it's really become something. I'm really excited for it. You can probably feel the energy.
Bro, I'm so stoked for you. Like, I mean, I've been following your career for a very, very long time, and I love the way that you've always done everything, like even the guys from Sleeper and the films that you make, and the way that you've always told your story. And there's just been such a cool level of like transparency and humility, but also enough, like you said, like your ego in the right place to sort of say the right things. Sometimes people don't really want to do that. And this just feels like it fits, you know, and to be in that place where you are on the bike you want to ride, running the stuff that you want to run, like that's such a rare opportunity in sport for somebody at the highest level to be able to pull that off. And I just love it for you. Like I'm really excited to watch it.
Yeah, no, I mean, everybody, I think the whole industry, to be honest, I know for a fact there's a lot of people kind of laughed at me when I said that was my plan, and the industry and the shape that it's in, it really did sound like a suicide mission. But I knew from day one, I've always been a gut instinct guy. I've always went on gut instinct. If something doesn't feel right in the stomach, listen to it, because it's 99% of the time it's bang on. And from the moment I closed my eyes and thought about doing this, I could see the whole thing. I could see the pits, I could see the people in there. It was almost like it was already created in another land. I just had to commit to it and it would show itself. And that is exactly what happened. You know, as soon as I made the commitment to, I'm doing it, it just started things like falling from the sky and just landing in place. And you're going, yes, this was the right time. And I was supposed to do this. It was the right thing to do. And then seeing how the industry has taken it on as, honestly, it's been so good. Like, we've had to obviously stop reading some of the comments at times because it's like you can't believe too much of that stuff. But the sport needed something really positive and it needed something really exciting. And I feel like we've brought that. Not that that's what I intended it to be. I knew we needed it to be exciting, but I kind of also knew it would be, because, like I say, nothing's happened in the sport like this for such a long time. And then to watch everything and watch the sport like blow up for like a week, and it was just positive stuff. Every single thing we posted was only positive comments, and I think it was so good for the sport to see that for a little while. And like you say, all those people saying, oh, the sport's in a really bad place, so to pull that off this year and show people that no, it's like your kind of mindset's in a bad place. Yeah, that everything's struggling, the world is struggling, but if you have the mindset of, oh, we're all struggling and it's really difficult, well, it's only going to get harder for you, you know. So we have put a group of people, and it's all down to the people I have. We have two guys from Slovenia, Tina and Grega, as well as Dom and Pascal from the bike brand. So Tina and Greg have been managing a team called Junior Tools, and it's had a few different bike brands over the years. They had an American rider, Dakota Norton. Don't know if he's ever been on the podcast. If not, you should line him up. He's a mega good motocross rider. So he ended up winning his... Yeah, good. He's a good one. He'll be a good chat. He ended up winning his first race with the junior guys on Da Vinci, and he won his last race with the junior guys on Da Vinci. So the guys have got some pedigree, and they've been racing for like 15 years, and they run like they're not Swiss, but they run like a Swiss watch. They're absolutely dialed. So I've got those two guys, so it feels like the management, well, they have literally been doing it for 15 years. So that side of things all taken care of. Paul and April from Net Performance have been working their asses off to pulling some funding and creating some partnerships. And we've done this, actually, we'll come out, can't say too much on it yet, but as far as like the business side of it, I've obviously tried to do it in a really sensible way to benefit all of us together. It's not your conventional team. Like, we will never swap bike brand again. We have kind of partnered with Gamix for life. We're not a team that just gets bike brands and moves things around. We are all one. When you come, if you want to ride a Gamix, you have to be on this team, and if you want to be on this team, you have to ride a Gamix, sort of thing. And that's how it will remain. And just that's fundamentally so we can control absolutely everything. So I went on a bit of a tangent there, forgot where we were, but
I love
keep
it.
shooting the questions.
No, I love it, dude. No, it's cool, man. You're in a super cool place. So tell me more about the bike, because I feel like I need one.
Yeah, honestly, you do. I wish everybody could have one. It's I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place with that one as well, because it's so good and I want everybody to experience it, but I want nobody to have the advantage. Like, feel it.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a conundrum, because I really want everybody to try it, and I want to scream it from the rooftops, like how it's so good and why it's so good. But at the same time, the margins are so hard to find in this sport, and finding 1% is massive, considering it's over, you do 1,000 runs a year on average. Let's say you found 1,000% realistically. So to find what I feel like has been 5, 10, 15% on all of the changes that I've made, like upside down forks, it's very unconventional in downhill, and they haven't been very popular for a really long time. They use them in motocross for a really good reason. Like, upside down is the way to design suspension. It just has to be done right. So going on to those, that was one major change. The handlebars that I've selected, the stem setup I can have.
What brand are the forks?
It's obviously an entirely... they're called Manitou, and they're called Dorado Pros. So they actually have carbon fiber stanchions, these ones as well.
They were the shit back in my day.
Yeah.
An intense M1 with Manitou Dorados and a Fifth Element progressive shock was like, just butter me up, bro.
Yep. I mean, I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened to those guys. That was just kind of before my time, obviously. And since getting into the sport, I've went back to the beginning and learned it from the start, because it's not really that long ago. It's pretty young, you know. When John Tomac was early 90s through the kind of 90s was peak, I'd say. 95 to late, I guess 2000s and early 2000s was like absolutely banging. So I've went back and seen it all. But yeah, the Dorado stuff was and is still absolutely insane. And in my opinion, the best I've ridden so far. And even off the shelf stock is like better than most things I've ever had in a bike. So the guys, I guess marketing at the end of the day, it's where do you choose to put your money? A lot of these companies they have the best product, but because they spend all their money on the product, nobody ever sees the product, which is it's a tough balance. And then other people, they spend all their money on marketing and their product's shit, and those guys are normally the ones that win. They're at the top of the pile. So yeah, you have to do your homework. And for me, straight away, I was like, well, obviously upside down's the way to go. You know, it's like there's a reason these motocross guys use these. And in 2017, I was on a team with Eddie Masters on Bergamot, and they had Dorados, just stock old Dorados, nothing fancy, and I absolutely loved them then. So as soon as this year was in discussion, Pascal was already working with Manitou, and his bike has been designed since 2018 around the Manitou product. So you're basically getting one put together item. You're not trying to get something else bolted on. So he's designed that bike around the strengths and weaknesses of everything, and it's just so dialed in. I think, were you not talking about somebody's bike on here with a CNC machine subframe maybe, and the difference of the sound?
I can't remember.
One of the moto days,
Maybe.
I don't know if it was on a... I think it was actually the engineer Pascal had heard you talking about it. You were standing somewhere, maybe next to the whoops, and I think actually it was an MXGP guy, maybe one of the Hondas, and there was something about it. You said it just sounded...
I know. Yeah. I know what I was talking about. Roman Fevre. I was at Italy at Trentino, and you could literally hear the difference. You could hear the difference, bro. So I stood at qualifying and I watched after the finish line go down, huge braking bumps, left-hander, down the hill a little bit, right-hander, onto the start straight. And so it was actually the sickest day. I just went there by myself. I got a media pass and I just fucking filmed like I was in 2008 again, like doing my thing. And it was actually the sickest day. Like the crowd was losing it because the crowd was seeing me and they were like, yes. So the whole way around the track that I went, the crowd was going off, and I was just getting to film the best dudes. But bro, Roman Fevre, his bike sounded beautiful. There was just this incredible sound. And what it was is the cradle of his frame was CNC machined. Cowie was trying all of these different versions.
Wow.
And they knew, yeah, bro. And like it would crack quite quickly. Like they knew that after X amount of hours it was going to crack in a certain place. But dude, the fucking sound, it was just making this like dull, absorbed thud every time that he hit the bump. And everyone else was just like, and I fucking blew my mind, dude. Honestly blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, literally that's the same mind-blowing experience that I went through when I tried this bike for the first time. It's for anybody at home that wants a simple experiment. Pick up a can of water or a can of beer when it's still full, give it a ding with a screwdriver or a fork or a knife or something, empty it, and then do the same again. It's like that echoing of noise. Noise is vibration, as we know. So if your bike's making a whole load of noise, it's making a whole load of vibration, which is getting passed straight into you. And at the end of the day, most things, same with the motocross world, they're made the way they're made because of manufacturing, and that is it. 90% of this stuff isn't really made for performance. The first protocol is how cheaply can we make this on mass, and then we'll worry about performance and how we get them together. That's sport through and through. Exactly, yeah. And for us, and probably the only race team out there actually, that if we decided today to machine an entire new bike, like something wildly different, in 1 month's time I could pull up to World Cup and be ready to race it. There's no other team can design a bike, decide what they want, design a bike, simulate it, get it manufactured, build it up, test ride it, and then make sure it's going to pass in order to race in like a 4 to 6 week period. Like that is insane. And that's kind of what we have now. We've went from these big, and it's nothing against them, it's business, man. It's the world. The dream if you start a bike company.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's to have a massive company and make loads of money. Like, of course, that's the plan. So I'm not hitting on them for it. It's just this sport, and motocross would be the same. I'm sure it's like you race 3, 4, 5 weekends in a row. We turn up to round 1 and somebody's made a massive quantum leap in bike performance. If you can't react to that right now and turn up the next again week with the same thing, well, you're just losing time at that point, you know, and it starts to play on your head. So that was this Gamix thing is, and with AON Racing, that was the whole goal, was to keep all of this stuff as close to home as humanly possible, with as few people that it needs to be, you know, okayed by in the corporate world is the best, because you can move really fast. It's like going from the Titanic to a speedboat now. So the company on a whole and the team can move around, and we're very mobile. So, but yeah, the bike. Going back to the bike, God, CNC is impressive. Obviously, it's a massive. The whole front triangle is one piece of alloy. It's machined on the one half, so the top half, let's say the right hand side, and then they'll flip the bit of metal over, and then they'll machine the other half out. So all of our pivot points, bearing sizes are all within like 0.05 of a millimeter or something. Like the tolerances are next level. And when you're trying to create an alloy bike with welding, as soon as you touch a bike with heat, you know, they morph and they change, and you can lose a head angle by a few degrees. Your swing arm axle might not be perfectly level. So every bike you pull out of a factory line and you spin the wheels or you try and change the gearbox, they're all slightly different. When you're mass producing stuff, like nothing's ever the same. It's really hard to control that, which again, it's just one of life's things. But that's what also with the CNC process, we've even managed to eliminate that. So the benefits of it are kind of never ending, to be honest.
It is important to me that supplements I take are of the highest quality, and that's why for years now I've been drinking AG1. Unlike many supplement brands, AG1 conducts relentless testing to set the standard for purity and potency. Quality for AG1 isn't just a buzzword, it's a commitment backed by expert-led scientific research, high-quality ingredients, industry-leading manufacturing, and rigorous testing. I know I can trust what's in every scoop of AG1 because it's tested for 950 contaminants and banned substances, while the industry standard typically only tests for 10. I love that every scoop of AG1 includes probiotics, prebiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support, rhodiola, and B vitamins for energy support. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs at drinkag1.com/gypsytales. Check it out. So whole top front tube is CNC'd, and then the Manitou upside down forks. It's crazy, bro. Nico Voulios used to run Bose suspension as well when he was in his dominant era, and then it pretty much went straight to the dudes like Sam Hill and those guys. Maybe Sam was running RockShox, but there was definitely like a generation, like Mick Hanna was running the Dorados on the M1. Like that was pretty much the bike. And then, just fully went away to just RockShox and Fox. With the conventional style. So what are you feeling out of the Dorados that is different to the conventional style?
I mean, the air spring in the Dorados is like, it's known for being one of the best in the world. Their 170, 180 Enduro fork is one of the best forks, if not actually, it is flat out the best trail bike fork that I've ever used. And it is still kind of conventional with the arch on the back. But going on to downhill stuff, Dorados, flex, honestly. It's like you can physically watch your front wheel deflecting off of things, and your hands don't get the same movement. You know, your hands are only like getting 10 to 20% of that movement in comparison to another bike where everything that your front wheel does, your hands do. But just allowing that, well, we've all tucked the front of a motocross bike in a rut, and you get back up and your front wheel's this way, but you just clamp it between your knees and straighten up again, and away you go. You know, it's like that movement is there for a reason, and that is the front end traction, specifically kind of torsional. So like if you're trying to climb up a camber on an angle, and you're trying to turn up the way, the fork just has so much more flex and bite that allows the wheel to kind of stand up and twist. And if you can kind of manipulate the front wheel, I guess, a little bit more to get it to climb up edges and ride over the top and around stuff. And then in situations where you're just mashing and hoping for the best, it just stays in a much truer line. So the flex and air spring are, I guess that's all the two parts of a fork, but definitely those are the two standout points for sure.
It's counterintuitive because I would have thought that upside down forks would have less flex.
Yeah, I mean, you know, our industry's mega frustrating sometimes because you're trying to reinvent the wheel, right? It's like you're trying to reinvent the bicycle. It's been a bicycle since forever, and in order to, I think people are bound by like how the bicycle looks too much, and that prevents them from getting creative and looking elsewhere. It's like, okay, well, what if it didn't have to look like a bicycle? And then everything changes. You know, the whole world changes. Like this bicycle serves a purpose of going down a hill really fast. That is all this bike has to do. Why is there even pedals on it? You know, it's like, could the sport get to a point where we're in BMX start gates? So you start on a gate in a hill and it goes ka-chunk, and then that's you're pedalless. You drop into like a roller coaster, and then that's it. You know, it's free coasting type thing. Like, why do we have to be bound to the rules of what a bicycle has been up to now? So yeah, I mean, I definitely have a lot of ideas of how to change things, and it is based on that. It's like, let's just look at this totally differently. But yeah, the bicycle industry is hell bent on stiffness, and like every year they bring out a new product and it's either lighter or it's stiffer, and that's kind of it. It's the only two things they change every year. It's like, right. So yeah, that's I think that's where forks are where they are. Manufacturers, again, as we've just discussed, you're trying to produce this stuff en masse. People want to ride bikes, and people do not need what I need out of a bike. You know, if I gave people my race bike now who were just getting into cycling, I would be doing them no favors. It'd be like giving you Max Verstappen's car to go down and get the shopping. You know, you'd just be doing donuts because it's not designed to go slowly. The torque would just have you crashing it everywhere, and that is the equivalent to our bikes. It's like the fact that we are expected to ride, and it's the same for the motocross dudes at Tomac talking about a 450 not being fast enough, like psychopath. But that man needs a faster motocross bike, so give him one if he can do it. You know, if he's man enough to hold on to it, you give that man that bike. And we're in the similar position now where I feel I am man enough to jump that jump right there, but if I do that, I'm going to fold in half on this bike. So let's make a better bike. You know, like that's my kind of concept. It's we need to move away if we want people to really get to what you can do on a bicycle. We have to get away from production stuff because it's meant for the people that they're making it for. But I don't particularly think it's meant. In fact, I kind of know it's not meant for the top 30 best guys in the world. You know, we could be on wildly different stuff, but there's no money.
So yeah, and it's funny when you say like lighter and more flex. For a downhill bike, I would assume that you would want it to be heavier. Lighter with less flex, so lighter and stiffer. I would feel like you would want heavier and more flex.
That's about the size of it. I know Dakota has talked. He's really into his flex on a bike, and flex on a mountain bike is super important. Do you surf?
Yeah. So
the if you view the front end of a mountain bike like a surfboard, and you view the rear wheel like your rudder at the back, like a super stiff rubber. Let's say we're on dirt and you want to corner. If it's really flexy, it's just going to fold over. The front wheel will go the other way. You end up, you know, kind of counter steering or whatever. It's too much. But if it's too stiff, you can't get it to bend and bite and then use the flex to lift yourself up or bounce around. So it's a really fine balance. A bike that's too stiff is horrible. You can't really get it to do anything. So I prefer to have a bike that's more flexy, but I also ride a bike really, really light. So even when I land off stuff really, really heavy, I've got a really good way of landing soft. But there's other riders out there like Brooke McDonald, who's just an absolute savage for a bike, you know. Yeah. a bike sees him coming and starts crying because the man can just charge at stuff, which great. But what that man's demands on a bike and my demands on a bike are two totally different things. The same as the difference between the fastest female, let's say, and Brooke McDonald. They're on the same production frames if they were on the same team. There's got to be like, it's going to be like 10, 15, maybe even 20 kg between those two people. And the forces generated through one in comparison to another
plus
is just
the force.
They're worlds apart. So it's really difficult. It's really, in fact, it's impossible for a mountain bike manufacturer to make one bicycle fit all of the different body styles, fit all of the different riding styles, and then work perfectly over 10 different tracks. It's like it's never going to happen. So you're trying to find a line of, right, well, it's good enough here, I'll lose a bit there, but I gain it there. You know, trying to blend one thing into an all-rounder, trying to make it universal, which is a very, very difficult task.
So what's the weight of your bike now in comparison to, say, like your old Trek? Is it heavier or lighter?
Our Treks were actually quite heavy. I think we were 18, somewhere in there. But my bike's about 19 at the moment. The thing is with the now we have a belt drive. The belt itself is a lot lighter than a chain. So you've lost weight there, even although you still have your belt. The mech and cassette has all just been taken away and moved to the front. It's all still there, so it's not really changed the weight. It's just the casing that you've then put all of that inside that's really added the extra weight. But you go and roll a polystyrene ball down a hill and you roll a big rock down the hill.
Yep.
We know what's going to win. So there's a definite advantage to weight. There has been a lot of racers over the last 2 or 3 years, obviously since the blow up of e-bikes. They ride an e-bike and they go, oh, this is insane, like it rides so good, and it's just because there's a massive weight between your ankles is a really obvious thing, you know. And since then, so many downhill racers now, you'll see so many photos of them whipping at a race and they've just got a massive lump of lead either duct taped or cable tied to the bottom of the bike, which is great. But now you've stuck a whole load of weight on a bike that was never designed to have that extra weight on it. So now your bike that was the right flex is now the wrong flex because it's got all that extra weight on it, right? So those manufacturers you end up chasing yourself around. So a few of them are now preparing boxes that are actually weight boxes, like a weight bias on the front of a tractor. You can select how much weight you want to have it in, and who knows where the round number is, because we do still need to accelerate, and you try and accelerate the rock over the polystyrene ball, you know what one will win that one. So again, that's another balance. It's like stiffness and flex is the same thing with weight. You need to accelerate quick, and you also need to slow down fast. So if your bike's really heavy, bigger brakes, harder work to slow down, but you'll carry more momentum. It's like, mate, it's never ending. You feel like this is the type of, it's like golf, you can never complete it. You just go round in circles, but it's fun.
It's beautiful though. You know, like it's a
really
beautiful thing to try and chase around, and I think it just gives so many people a chance to get it either right or wrong, and then you add in just like the level of talent that you guys have in terms of riding these things. But I mean, it makes so much sense to me, and I remember the first time I ever rode an e-bike, I was just like, let's fucking go. This is for me.
Yeah.
Because it was just so planted and so much more balanced. And then I've got one full-size e-bike and one mid-size e-bike, and I almost prefer the full-size purely for weight and just being able to, like, I just don't need to change directions that quick. Like I almost would rather the heavier stability feeling and like running wider, flowier, you know, more apex than the quick kind of changes of directions. And it's like you could just feel that within the weight. Both brilliant bikes, but you could feel that the heavier bicycle was more stable and allowed. It's almost like I would oversteer the lighter bike so much more because every action that you put in with your body weight was just exaggerated so much. It's like you just need so much more finesse and you need to be so much more gentle. Whereas the heavier bike, like you almost have to throw your weight around and you kind of get rewarded for that in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like loading up a container ship, right? It's like when that container ship's empty, it's just going to float, so they have to fill it full of water to hold it down. And then once they put all the containers on, they can pull some bias out. Like it's the same thing. If the rider's the shipping containers and the bike's the boat, it's like there needs to be some sort of balance between the two weights. And when you've got riders that are anywhere between 50 kg and 90, maybe 100 kg for some of us guys, it's like that balance is really important, because like we've just said, you're trying to get one bike to suit all of those different containers. It's like the mass majority of those containers are going to suck, they're going to fall off. So it's a really, really important thing. Weight, it's as important possibly in motocross. I've always wondered this with motocross guys. You watch them train like absolute dogs, and if you come to a downhill race, it's more like being at an amateur boxing event, like with how the riders are built. We've all got big shoulders, pretty big chests, really, really strong backs, big quads, almost like ski racers. And I know like Chase is a big guy and he's pretty strong, but he's not bulky. He's not like swollen big. No. He's really strong. And then you see somebody like Marvin Musquin when he was at his peak. He was like a stick. He looked so narrow. Yeah. So thin, eh? And you're like, that dude is the best in the world at holding on to one of the hardest things in the world to hold on to for 30 minutes round Southwick, and he looks like that. So I think that's a fine line as well in downhill, where the heavier the thing is on the bike, the harder the bike's going to need to work, the stiffer everything needs to be, so the heavier it'll need to be. But then Jackson Goldstone, really, really light, he just looked like his bike was doing nothing, just ta-dun. And I know for a fact a lot of the top level guys... But it probably
hurts him. Oh, sorry, keep going.
I know for a fact there's probably 2 or 3 of the top, and like the top 10 downhill racers last year, just because of Jackson, decided to approach their off-season differently this year and lose up to 5 kilograms just from watching him and seeing how much easier it looked to ride the bike, And the bigger muscles you have, the more oxygen you need, the more blood you need to pump. There's a balance with athletes for sure, where size does not always equate to strength, and size is not, this big thing that we should all be focusing on. It's like you can be a small dude and be really strong. That is possible as well, and that's probably more important for downhill. There's a right weight for a downhill rider, I'd say, for a perfect weight or a good weight,
Yeah, and I think there's probably the difference in the two worlds is that you guys have to make your own power. Whereas the motorcycle, like a Marvin Musquin, he has all of the power given to him, and then it's just up to him to use the power correctly.
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, you see Tomac on a start line, like with his thighs squeezing the tank of the bike, and then you see somebody like Marvin Musquin next to him, and if you were a betting man and somebody said to you, right, who's getting the whole shot over a 100-meter start, you'd be like, well, the small guy, obviously. It's like there's the power to weight's really important on a motocross bike, and for us it's just as important. It's not for accelerating, it's for decelerating, really. We do need to pedal out the gate, and we need to be pretty powerful. But like I say, pedaling is becoming less and less and less. It's almost extinct in downhill racing now. You could get down to a single speed, if not a 3-speed transmission for pretty much all the tracks we go to. So leg power and stuff like that isn't actually that important. And Jackson, again, prime example of that. You put Loic Bruni and Jackson Goldstone next to each other. Those are 2 wildly different creatures. One's still a boy, one's a man, and a really strong man, and they're eeksy-peeksy when it comes to racing. So body type, it's a wonderful thing about downhill and motocross. Body type, although it would be important on a mathematical side if you were trying to get a fast start or brake really quickly, but like I said earlier, at the end of the day, there's more to between the ears and how you put all that together into motion to actually make the difference. But they're definitely worth looking at, small advantages.
So the other thing you guys have going on is the gearbox, and that Kenny was talking about. Even when he was on a Honda with an electric start, they took it off and put a Kickstarter back on because he didn't like how the motor from the electric start made the bike feel. So that's taken this little motor that's high up on a 112, 114 kilo motorcycle and going, no, that weight is too high in the wrong spot. Don't want it. Take it off. I want a Kickstarter. So you're doing, and in terms of like a percentage of what that weight would be overall, that would be nothing compared to a derailleur and cassette hanging off the very back of a bicycle.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know the exact stats on what mechs are up to now, but I know for a fact they're only getting bigger as they try and make the mech strong enough, because obviously it's in the most vulnerable place ever. So they get smashed and knocked and bent, and they go through a really hard time. So they're only actually getting heavier and heavier. And now with the addition of electric shifting, they've gotten really heavy, because now you've got a battery on the bike as well as your shifter. Like there's a lot of added weight now with modern bicycle gearing. And yeah, the gearbox is, let's say the conventional drivetrain's like between 200 and 300 grams, depending on what one you have. Like I say, all we've done is moved it from a point that wants to move and be as free as humanly possible, which is the rear axle, and we've just moved it to the sprung mass, which is the frame, and it's right between your feet. It's like, that's not new science by any means. And Pinion, who make our gearbox, have been doing this for a really long time. They've been making these things since like, I think 2012. They had zeros with a gearbox. Like, they're not overly new. It's just, like I say, it's the powerhouses of the conventional drivetrain manufacturers have just had the biggest pie, and they've just had it locked out for so long, and it's taken that money to kind of dry up for other people to look elsewhere. But for me, it was since I started mountain biking back in 2013. Me and my dad stood in the garage one night. I'd maybe had my bike like 2 weeks. The mech's ripped off. It's gotten wrapped around the spokes, so it's destroyed a rear wheel. I've destroyed a mech. I've destroyed a hanger. My chain's wrapped up. And he's looking at me like, we've just spent £2,000 on this bike, and you've done that to it on day one. And what is that you've been doing there? You know, like looking at a motocross bike and then looking at these things, and he's going, what have you done, man? Like, what was wrong with the motocross bike? And yeah, for day one, I was like, why? How has nobody made a gearbox for one of these yet? And I honestly can't believe it's taken, what's that been, nearly 13 years now till I'm actually on a bike with a gearbox. It's crazy that it's taken that long. But for sure, to me, the next 3 years, if you're not on a gearbox bike, you will probably not be on a World Cup downhill team. Like, I genuinely feel that strongly about it. It makes no sense. The mech makes no sense for downhill at all. And I'm really sorry to the conventional manufacturers.
Well, yeah, I mean, dude, yeah, it kind of is what it is. Like,
it's evolution, man. What are you going to do about it? It's what it is.
My dad said the same shit. Like, when I got an old M1 that I bought secondhand off one of the race team dudes, and it was fucked. I had to weld. That bike got welded up like 5 times, and I ruined so many derailleurs, and it was just like the biggest piece of shit. And the derailleur was still that was the problem. And right now I have like, probably, I don't know what the top of the line is, but like the bike I have has basically the best derailleur on it, but it doesn't matter. Like, whether you got the cheapest derailleur or the best derailleur, you're still going to need to adjust it, and you're still going to ruin it if you hit it. You know, it's like, it's this weird part of tech in the mountain bike world where it doesn't matter if you've got the best or the worst. It's kind of going to give you the same issues. Like, you can't say that about suspension or brakes or the frame. Like, if you have the best frame versus the worst frame, you're not going to experience the same issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and you're absolutely bang on. And in fact, sometimes the cheaper spec stuff actually shifts much nicer. Like the electric stuff's really good, but it's electric at the end of the day. So it's got 2 settings: it's on or it's off. But when you have a wired, I don't know, is your stuff wireless?
Yeah, well,
so
I have
if you have
both.
wired shift,
so I have both. Or like on 2 separate bikes,
right?
not
Okay,
the same bike, obviously. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's perfect. So you'll know anybody else that's either switched recently to electric or still has both, or even your dropper cable, it gets to a point where the tolerances are a little bit off. You've knocked the mech a wee bit. It's not running quite right. But because you ride your bike every other day, you pick up its little quirks, and it's like shutting a door in an old house. You just have to lift it a wee bit and kind of get it in the right angle, and it will close. And that's kind of what the mech becomes. Yeah. It's like you ride it for 2 months. Analogy. You've knocked it in so many. You've knocked it in so many different ways that your thumb's like doing some sort of riddle on the shifter to get it to go up a gear so you don't snap a chain. It's that, in a sense, is better than when you bend an electric shifter, because it just sits there going, oh, I don't know what to do, and then that's you're out on a training ride, you're halfway up a hill somewhere, and you're having to get an app out on your phone, and it just doesn't. It's got pros, of course. Like, there's a reason they're making those products, but there's definitely downsides to them as well that match that. And the gearbox pretty much eliminates every single one of them. There's one downside, which is it's friction whilst pedaling, which there's obviously a little bit more of, because it's more like a car gearbox. You've got a lot of contact points in the cogs at all times. But once you run those motors in, I think they need like 500k maybe to be running, which is a fair bit, but they've got like lifetime warranty. I think they go like 3,000 kilometers before you even need to change the oil in them. And then they'll do like another 3, which is, you try and do 6,000 kilometers now on a conventional drivetrain. Good luck, buddy. It's completely enclosed. Yeah. It's never going to see the elements. You don't need to oil the chain. The chain will never get rusty. The hanger doesn't bend. You don't need to change a gear cable. Like, just tell me when to stop. They're never ending. So I think it's going to be quite the wave. And I just really hope that other manufacturers see that and get behind it as well. And it'll push the other guys that are there with conventional drivetrains to get creative and come up for something to beat it. It's like what is it they say? All rising tides, all boats rise with rising tides or something. It's like,
yeah, a rising tide floats all boats.
That's the one, exactly. So it's a good thing, and it will help everybody initially. But I think for this first year or two, if I'd feel like Fred Flintstone if I had a mech on my bike, it's like, that's how old it feels now that I've gotten used to this new system. A bike looks so old fashioned now with that thing hanging off the back wheel. It's pretty crazy. We should probably stop slagging these off. I'm sorry.
Nah, I mean, it's what you're here for, mate. Nah. No, I mean, it's cool. Like, you're in an industry that really hasn't changed for a really long time, and it's like, I just can't stress enough. Like, if you're listening to this pod and you're one of our regular listeners that really froths moto, like, the fucking level of you guys is fully retarded. Like, it is so crazy, the athletes that are at the top of your sport, but it's like it doesn't feel like everything else has lifted with it. You know what I mean? It's like you guys are just getting better and better and better and better and better and better. And the bikes have got better, for sure. The bike that I like, even the mid-size e-bike that I ride now is 30 times better than the M1 that I had in like 2006 or 4 or whatever the fuck it was when I had one. And so it's like, it definitely has got better, but it's still the same thing. There's no seismic changes. It's made of carbon fiber. It's got a derailleur. The brakes are the same. Like, it's got a chain. The tech hasn't really advanced in a crazy way. And now we're in a time where you're one of the best guys in the sport and you are now on this completely different thing. And I mean, like, the Athens have had some cool stuff going on with, like the bonded frames, and Nico has built his own bike company to like his exact specifications, and the Williams racing bike is fucking wild and has the gearbox. And now there is a time where there is this movement and there is stuff happening. So it's like, fucking let's talk about it. It's got to change.
Yeah, no. Absolutely. No, that's it. And that's been what I felt like. I felt like I've been a a child almost sat at the zoo, a zoo for bikes, and just been watching from the outside, going, you know, when's something amazing going to happen? And Honda came out in 2010 and turned the world upside down in downhill, like literally forks upside down. This massive chrome-looking spaceship gearbox, like the thing was insane. What looked like a motocross shock off of like a Super Mini or a 65 on it, you know, like proper Showa work suspension. And they disappeared. Apparently that was all a test for a superbike swing arm. That was the only reason they were there, was to find a space to develop the specific shape of that swing arm. And then if you look at the MotoGP bikes around that time,
that's what it is on the MotoGP, yeah.
Looked identical. So it kind of makes sense, but like that goes to show you that if you have the right, I guess, creativity, but more importantly the funding, somebody behind it that's truly passionate to solve a problem, there's a lot that can be done out there. And that's kind of what the sport needs now. It needs some people to come in from the outside and realize that what we have is downhill is a completely open market for as much as you can imagine we can create in downhill, because there are no rules. We basically have a wide open technically in the rule book, our bikes, they need to have like a saddle, I think, is which define a saddle to me. I can sit on a table, you know, so can I put one of them on my bike? Like, I could sit on anything. And the other rules are like so vague. So all of these companies now with 3D printing, CNCing, electrics, ABS we could have on a bike. Now that our bike has a battery in it for our shifting, well, could we get brake lights on the bike? Can we have ABS front and rear? Like, where can this go? And yeah, I think if you get somebody passionate from outside this industry to realize what we are, which is just a coat hanger basically for whatever you can imagine to develop, we can do it over here. And there's like no sports out there that exists in right now. So come and get a piece of it. You know, it's hella exciting right now.
Have you ever looked into much 3D titanium printing?
I personally haven't done a whole lot. Obviously, I'm very familiar with it. I know what it is. My engineer, Pascal, the bike engineer, he knows absolutely everything about every process on producing metal and manufacturing bikes. So he's definitely looked into it. Titanium's a very stiff metal. So for downhill, that flex balance, I think it's the number one reason that nobody's created a bike completely out of titanium, because obviously it'd be like the lightest thing ever, but it's so rigid. So titanium is for sure good in certain areas, but it's still not the best. Steel, there's still people convinced that steel downhill frames will be the future. There's a few people have tried it. Nobody's really had anything. Have they just not had the fastest rider on one yet, or is it just not the best material? We don't know that yet, but I don't personally think carbon is the best material. It looks really nice and it's super light and you can control the flex really well, but the feeling, like I say, it's still like riding a tin can. It's still like a welded aluminium tube. It's still a carbon hollow tube, you know. It's still got that kind of shaky vibration feel to it. So there's definitely other possibilities out there, but the bikes with the titanium tubing and bonded together, obviously that was a bit of a wave started by Atherton's. Pivot picked up on it, Specialized have been doing it, so that's probably the most popular way at the moment, and that's just down to how easy that is. You can print lugs and change the tube size and adjust that bike however you want really easily by just changing the lengths of those tubes. It's not an overly complicated process, and it's, I wouldn't say cheap to do, but once you've got yourself set up, it's a relatively easy way of doing it. So, yeah.
And so what about the experience of riding the bike? Obviously good, but I mean, how different is the feeling, and what's the most exciting thing about the ride itself?
Ooh, I'd say it's the closest I've ever been in my career to blurring the lines between mountain bike speeds and motocross speeds. So like motocross speeds, I don't know, maybe you know actually, can you help me with a stat? What's an average speed of an AMA outdoor motocross track? The fastest one, what is it? Fox Hills? Not Fox anymore, Pala?
Nah, Ironman's probably the fastest. I feel like
True. Yep.
70 k's an hour maybe would be like a good
peak
average. Yeah.
Average?
I would think so.
Like in a lap, maybe 30, 40k or something?
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I know like there's one of those sections where the boys are like wide open down a hill. Like there was a track, the track that I ride in Dubai. The peak speed that I was doing was 98 k's an hour every lap, and so
Wow.
and that was like my 450 wedged, and like there's guys
Wow.
that would go way faster than me. Like I'm at full throttle at one point, you know, but there's guys that are just building speed, not blipping, not letting off like at all. So I mean, I'm sure some of those boys were doing 105, 106. But yeah, I'm pretty sure at Ironman,
Wow.
there's some fucking high speed shit that those dudes are doing.
I mean, I guess it's also crazy in downhill because they're basically silent. So to think that we can do, I think there was a speed trap at Munson and one year that somebody clocked 80 kilometers an hour on a mountain bike.
That is so unwell.
And if you go into the Vital Raw now, it's from Munson and I'm pretty sure it was Brooke McDonald, and it was like 2000 and was it as far back as 18, possibly 17, 18? And John Lawyer was stood at this bottom corner that we were hitting and jumping out of doing like 80k an hour. And at that point, you're pretty much restricted by aerodynamics and how confident you are that you're not going to just hit a pebble.
Yeah.
You know, that's all it would take on a mountain bike to absolutely destroy you at that speed, or your tire blowing out, you know. So gnarly. And the equivalent, again, that everybody's like, it's kind of one of the main reasons I've jumped to 6D moto helmets over the last 2 years, because I've just watched since I started it come from about 22, 23 kilometers an hour average all the way up to 30 now, you know, and that's happened in like the course of 7-8 years. And not only that, you look at the terrain that we're landing on. So a motocross helmet's designed for motocross speeds and motocross impacts, but they're always kind of landing on dirt. Of course, the dirt can be hard pack. I respect that. But we can literally land on a rock that's just one savage point, you know, that's like 3 inches tall. There's roots. You wouldn't believe the stuff that lies on a downhill track that we just ride on over. And then you're doing 70k an hour on top of that. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, we should have like super bike suits on. You know, we should have leathers on with what's lying on the ground and the possibilities of what you could do it yourself, airbag technology, so much stuff. The reality is we've got a pair of pajamas on because the material is as thin and light as it can possibly be. So you're wearing pajamas and a pair of knee pads and just, right, see at the bottom, guys, you know, and off you go, 80 kilometers an hour down a ski piece. It's insane. It really is. You need to stop yourself sometimes and look and go, wow, like we are nuts.
Well,
we're actually mental.
I completely agree. It's absolutely insane, the risk that you guys are exposed to and just what you get away with, you know. But have you ever looked into the Alpine Stars airbag stuff? Because apparently Faulkner's racing with it this weekend in Supercross.
Interesting, yeah. So I know Vince that used to be the Fox guy. I don't know what his exact name was, but Vince moved to Alpine Star. You probably know, big tall Vince. So great guy, super good friends with Loris. So I remember him telling Loris last year that their plan was to come out with some airbag stuff, and obviously me and Loris were like, yes, that would be so sick for downhill because it would look really slim, keep you out of the wind as much as possible. But if you did have a huge, it will puff up. The big problem with, and I don't know how they're going to get around this in motocross. Once you crash, you need to finish the moto. So once the airbag's popped, then what happens? Because then now I'm thinking I'm going to get back on. Most of them are designed to gradually deflate. Well, now if I have a hugie, I'm protected by a plastic bag. It's like, what happens then? So I think that's the problem with downhill at the moment, is like you can have a crash, if not two in a run, and you still need to get back up and finish. And I guess it's the same for motocross. Whereas for super bikes, you crash, your bike's probably blasted, you're done. MotoGP, you crash, you're kind of done. Like, it's a lot easier to make a protection item for a sport like that in comparison to motocross, where you need to protect yourself against a rock. You know, a 450 can throw half a house brick at you doing like 40 miles an hour. If you've got no airbag, it needs to have some sort of other armor under that, and then you start layering up, you start getting super sooty. It's an area that there's huge potential in protection for downhill and motocross, I'd say, but the airbag stuff's difficult, isn't it, for that reason?
Yeah, I think it's just going to get better and better over time, and there's probably a way to just like have a release valve on it or something. But I mean, I think for you guys, like if you crash in a run to where that airbag goes off, like you're probably not winning the run again.
Exactly.
But I guess there's points and all that sort of stuff. Have you noticed a difference with the wearing a moto helmet? Because I feel like, I mean, I'm probably going to do some downhill runs at some point here soon, and I'll just be wearing my moto helmet.
Yeah. So you should, absolutely. I mean, actually on the bike it makes no real odds at all. The viewing size is the same. Arguably your head gets a wee bit hotter, but in small price to pay for the extra safety that it can bring. Most downhill mountain bike helmets are made for breathability is like their number one focus, which just you don't really need in a downhill run. You know, you put your helmet on at the top and you need to have that thing on for 4 minutes, and during those 4 minutes I've got a lot more on my mind than what temperature my head's at. So I just opted for the maximum amount of safety straight away. Like I say, the average speeds that we're doing at now are the same as an AMA motocross track, which is mental. So yeah, stick a motocross helmet on it. It makes total sense. The goggle interface, everything works fine. We pretty much use motocross goggles as well for downhill anyway. So the only maybe argument is the size, because the motocross bike's so much bigger. You can get away with the big helmet doesn't look out of place. The rider will always look small on a motocross bike, whereas on a downhill bike, because everything else is so skinny and our kit's all so tight, it can look a bit bubble-heady, but I've just fully lent into that, to be honest. I don't really care. It's great marketing. The helmet stands out. Everybody looks at it. I don't think there's any problems with that, to be honest. So yeah, I advise everybody, if you're going over average speeds of 25-30 kilometers an hour, you should probably be wearing a motocross helmet.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense to me. So what else on the team or the program, like, is there anything else that you're super stoked on and that's kind of like different and out of the box?
We've got a lot of stuff coming, I'm not going to lie. There's probably no part of the bike that won't be tinkered with and fettled with. We've already started working on bike number 3, so the last post on Instagram I put up, just a few short clips, was the second generation of the bike. So we've not even been to a race yet. The team's only been formulated for a month, and in 2 months' time I could have 3 bikes to choose from. So that's already insane. I've been playing a lot recently with flat pedals. I've always been a massive fan of flat pedals. There's just something about it's harder. It's undoubtedly harder, and I've kind of known, if you speak to any of my friends, I'm known for doing things the hard way sometimes, just because I want to prove to myself. And flat pedals to me is the ultimate form of mountain biking. It's so damn difficult. It'd be like trying to ride snowboard with no clips. A motocross bike with like no foot pegs is what it would feel like. It's just that much harder. So I'd really like to look into flat pedals and see if there's a way of blurring the line between a flat and a clip, and try and win a World Cup on flat pedals. Is like a really small goal that I've got quite far down the priority list, but I think that would be cool, because it, like I say, pedaling's becoming less and less now, and one of the number one benefits of clips is the fact that you can pedal in them stronger. So if we lose the need to pedal, then we could gain elsewhere, and I think there are gains to be made from flat pedals. There's better ways to design them, and the shoe is always, there's one shoe designed for kind of one pedal. I guess this goes back to the bike industry in a nutshell. It's like you're creating a pedal. Every pedal has to fit this standard of crank. So the crank company is now limited, and the pedal company is now limited. And that's the bike through and through. So at AON Racing, we now have the possibility to machine any part we like. So I'll be machining my own stems this year. We'll possibly be creating our own crowns, our own cranks if we want. We've also merged with Hope Technologies in the UK, who are a massive manufacturer of brakes and huge in the trials motor world, as you know. Amazing guys, Sam Sharp, Daniel Bladen, who was on our old team. Those guys have looked after us so well over the last few years. So they've basically given us free rein. Like, if you guys have an idea, we'll provide the engineering hours and we'll make it with you. So hell, at some point we might even get into the world of making our own suspension. There's been a few conversations about that recently, and at the moment we have Manitou, who are absolutely brilliant right now. They're fully in on our idea of how racing needs to go now, and that just whatever you guys need sort of thing is how all of our sponsors have reacted. They love that storyline, and they want to be a part of the progression and see where they as a company can get cycling and how they can make cycling look, which so refreshing, and it's almost hard to believe that there's companies out there as big as the ones that are supporting us, willing to do that and believing in me and my ideas in order to do it. So yeah, to answer your question, Jace, pretty much everything on the bike will get fiddled with at some point. So you guys will need to watch pretty closely as well, because some of them might be kind of hidden.
And so, I guess, like, from the marketing side, like, your team's awesome. Like, even in the way that they help set this up, and, you know, like, I could tell that you've got a pretty good team behind you in that sense. Like, are you guys planning on documenting the process? Like, what are we going to see of it?
Yeah, so I guess we'll crank it back. You dealt with April and Paul from Net Performance Management. They've been super helpful with all of this stuff, setting up of the team. From the creative side, that was pretty much me and Sleeper Co. It's been our whole lives. We grew up in the same village from 4 or 5 years old together. We saw each other every single day, all day, and he was the first guy.
Dude, he's
to grab
a G, bro.
He's insanely good at what he does. He really is. He's blown the mountain bike industry apart really in the last 2 years. Like, everybody's talking about Sleeper, which is amazing. I'm so proud of him for chasing his dream, and he put himself in some really tough places. He pulled out of university. He didn't know what he was going to do, and he put all his chips in, and he set out to create a media company. And not only has he done it, but he's like, right now he's sitting at the top of the tree, and he set the standard for everybody else. And it's like people commenting on all of my stuff, and the love and hype he's getting now is amazing to see. And I'm, like I say, I'm super proud of him and happy for him. And I'm really lucky to have him as a friend, helping me doing what I'm doing, because it's the reason my stuff has all been so good. I have a really good creative. He actually calls me director Reece every now and then, because I feel like I'm a natural director, I guess. It's not that I've worked on it or anything, but some people just have visions for stuff and how something needs to look, and I'm very particular with how I want things to look. So from step one, when I left Trek and I started my own thing, I was like, oh my God, I actually have control over how all of this looks, how things sound, what the team's called, like literally everything. And I kind of didn't realize I would have that power. So me and Max just getting to sit down at night and just brainstorm, and come up with ideas. What can we do? And every team had restrictions this year. The teams were being launched quite early on, and we were unsure as to whether we'd have all the riders on bikes, if we'd have all the kit. We knew that it wouldn't be printed, and a lot of teams were under the same restrictions. So my dad has an engineering shop. My passion's engineering. We were doing this to re-engineer the sport. So let's get down to the workshop, let's get the welder going, let's get the grinder out. And we just shot a whole load of stuff, and then we'd go back to his house, we sit in front of the laptops and computers, and hours of listening to songs until one makes your hair stand up, and you're like, that's it, that's the one, it works for the clips. The process, and I really enjoy that process, and Max really enjoys that process. So he's helped massively. But that launch, like I said before, has been received so much better than either of us could ever have imagined. Like, it was a bit of a blow up for 2 weeks, which was pretty surreal for both of us.
What was the sentiment in the industry, or like the comments and that? Like, it was obviously super positive, but like, what was the positivity based on?
New and exciting is what most people had said, is the fact that finally this is something that, like, we can expect to see some wildly different product this year. There's bikes that are going to look different to how they normally look, and that was probably the number one thing on most comments, was the look of the bike and how excited people were about the tech. There was a lot of people excited about the freedom with sponsors. So like manufacturers, basically them all, whether it's kit or components, being like, yeah, we can do anything you guys can think of, sort of thing. We're behind you on it. That's like, people never normally get that. It's just how fast can you go in production stuff up until this point. So that was probably the most exciting. And then honestly, third most exciting was the fact Sleeper was going to be involved in documenting everything. We're probably going to come out with another Flying Scotsman. That one was received like, none of us expected that. I think it's like 700,000 views now on YouTube, which was nuts. And that was just a self-funded project. I think Max lost about 15 grand on it, and I probably lost about 5 or 10. And yeah, we just done it because we wanted to do it, and we thought it was a cool movie, and it just took off. And that was the first time for me. Like, after that, I was getting recognized in like supermarkets and stuff at like, an hour away in some different town, and somebody was like, oh, my son was watching your movie the other day on YouTube, and he won't believe you that I've met you. And that was when it hit me, like, wow, the power of YouTube is serious. And our sport's really bad, and has been really bad in the borders where I come from. We have a saying called "it's I been," And that kind of can be backed up with, so didn't change it. And that's like, just, it's always been like this, so don't think outside the box, just keep doing it like this, because we're all safe and it's working fine. And I've never been that guy. I just can't live in that box of, I'm always looking like, well, yeah, but what if, you know, what if it's better over there? And sometimes that can be as we know, grass is always greener. That can sometimes bite you, but at the same time, you've got to take risks. So that's me and Max are both very risky people, and we made the Flying Scotsman and just thought, fuck it, we're putting it on the internet, and it blew up. So we definitely need to do the Flying Scotsman. We've pretty much documented, I think now, like 3 years worth of documentation we've got. So we're sitting on a ridiculous amount of footage right now. So we'll definitely make something, but we now can't decide whether we start another one. We just document for another 2 years with this new journey and start it there, or we don't really know now. We don't really know, but him being on board, you can guarantee every single thing will be filmed, and we will be showing as much of it as possible. The Instagram stuff's going to be hectic this year, and long form content hopefully in the future is coming as well. We need to get better at putting out regular movies on YouTube, sorry. So yeah, there'll be a lot coming.
Yeah, he's a G, dude. I would love to do something with him one day. Like, he's got such just quality. Like, very, very, very high quality, and just like great visuals, great storytelling. Like, yeah, that dude, yeah, he gets it.
It really does. There's something about his movies that I've seen people, you know, we've been watching a movie in a room and somebody's walked in and they've been like, oh, is that a sleeper thing? It's like some of his videos just have this feeling within the first 15 seconds. It's like it's inside you, you know, and you've got the goosebumps and your hair's standing up. It just, how he has that ability, where it came from, who knows? Some people just have it and some people just don't. And he is one of the guys that can just sit in a dark room with a computer screen, and only a computer screen, for 4 days on end, and just come out with this absolute, you know, just masterpiece of perfection. And his perfection is it's actually a bit sickening sometimes. He sends you a video and you're like, right, it's ready to go, and he's like, fucking nowhere near it. And you're like, what? And he talks you through it, and there's a blank spot there and there's that there, and he will recomb and edit 10 times, you know, and it'll take him hours to do that each time, but it's worth it when it comes out, and it's well worth it every time. So yeah, an absolute G. He'll be stoked that you're into his stuff. He'll be buzzing on that. He'll definitely get together and do something.
Nah, dude, I've messaged him all the time on Insta. Like, I've messaged him a bunch of times. Whenever shit comes out, I'm like, bro, you're fucking killing it. So can you paint the landscape a little bit
Sick.
of like what has happened in downhill and what has changed over these last couple of years and where it's at? Because actually, I'll preface this too. I'll go on my bit of a rant first, right? In moto,
go for it.
Nothing ever fucking changes. There's so much that you could do. The stadiums are packed. They've got tons of money. Nothing changes. These minute, minuscule, tiny things happen over the course of like 15 years. So it's like we're almost at the opposite end of the spectrum, you know? So it's like, I understand that some of the changes might be not the best in a way, but it's like, fuck, at least they are changing.
That's honestly, that's it in a nutshell. That's exactly how I've perceived it. It was, of course, it was good before. I don't know what motocross is like, but in downhill we had this huge problem. The whole world fell apart when somebody decided to go from a 27-inch wheel to a 29-inch wheel. You know, it was, the sport was over. You've ruined it over the sake of, you know, an inch on a wheel. And look at us all now. Everybody's on 29er. You know, it's like change for some people is really, really difficult. And if you don't change, what's the saying? If you don't fuck around, you can't find out, you know, like you gotta. And for us, for the Freecaster initially was like insanely good viewing on downhill, the very, very old days. Of the commentators could literally get drunk and just scream down the microphone. Of course, it was fantastic comical value. Like, it was great entertainment. But when you start, if you want money, which everybody wants the sport to get recognition. All of these athletes want to get the money that they deserve. And if you want that, you have to make the sacrifice of going into the commercial world. And when you step into the commercial world, there are just rules that are in place. And even if they don't make sense, they're in place because that is how society functions. And fundamentally, you have to have some of these rules just to keep everything actually working and not just burning down. And as simple as it was Red Bull for a really long time, it went from Freecaster to Red Bull, and now Warner Brothers Discovery has come in, along with the ESO, which was Chris Ball, and he started the Enduro World Series a few years ago, which launched the company ESO, and he's the organizer for all of that sort of stuff. So he has obviously got together with some very intelligent people, and intelligent people know what this sport is. They've visited a few of our races. They've been stood at the bottom of the hill with 25, 30,000 screaming fans, a rider crossing the line, the place just getting mobbed, smoked. Like, it looks absolutely amazing when you're in person. And they've obviously seen that and thought, absolutely, there's a business model here, and they put their money where their mouth is, and they've stepped into a really difficult sport to make change in, as we've all found out. It's been met with nothing but really negativity, is how you'd sum it up, and it is what it is. And you can, it's tough to step the line right on this one, but for me it just is. This is what's happened. Somebody somewhere saw our sport, and they have been willing to put a massive injection, the biggest investment our sport's ever seen, and we should be so lucky to have a company come in as big as Warner Brothers Discovery to try and elevate our sport, and to try their best to get it into mainstream media and get outside non-endemic sponsorship money in, which is what every sport wants and needs. And they're finally here, and they're finally trying. And like you say, they're trying to make differences. And a lot of the differences are like, people are getting upset, but just because it's different, I think. It's like it's not that it's any better or that it's any worse. It's just something different. So like I say, my reaction to it is, well, sweet, that it is what it is. I can still turn up and race. I can still win the race. I can still get a rainbow jersey, and I can still make prize money. Nothing's changed for me as a rider. But when I walk into a random bar in Europe, Eurosport's on the TV, and here's my race run. I'm bombing down the hill. There's a pub full of old guys who've never seen downhill mountain bike in their life, and here it is on the TV. You only need a tiny percentage of these like 200 million viewers or whatever it is, to go, that's actually pretty cool. I'm going to go in there and follow that. And it makes a huge difference to a small sport like ours. So that was never going to happen with the old method. It was just continuously going to be a marketing platform for an energy drink, and it was great, as undoubtedly it was really good. But these guys and the money that's behind them, they do have the potential to make it better, but it needs to be met with a more positive attitude. And at the moment, from my side, it's just been a whole load of, oh, you can't do that. And then they'll ask, well, okay, what should we do then? What's your idea? Well, I don't know. It's like, right, well, just go and sit over there and don't say anything then. That would be more helpful, And that has been, honestly, our industry through and through. It's like so many people just dogging on it with no solution to the problem. And as well, we don't know. I have no idea what the ins and outs of a company as big as Warner Brothers Discovery, the millions that they'll be putting into this. I don't know how that company works. We don't know where the restrictions are further up the field. We just don't know. So don't comment on it if you don't know. Just leave yourself out of it, and just control what you can control. And me as an influencer of the sport, it's my job to try and stay as positive as possible and keep these people viewing, keep the people excited about the sport, keep them here, and don't let that negativity just lead everybody off into the land of, oh, the sport's done, I'm giving up, I'll never watch it again. That's helping nobody. So that's really, in a nutshell, that's been the last 2 years for the motocross guys. It's like a massive injection of cash from a massive company that has been met by a whole load of grumpy people that don't want change, and maybe haven't seen the opportunity that might not be here forever. So I'd just like to see people being a little bit more proactive about it,
So what were the changes that they made that were so different? So the format changes, some semifinals. What were like the big ticket changes that people, I guess, regardless of liking or not liking?
I guess the fundamental reason that it really upset everybody is our sport has gotten to a level now where the top 30 guys are really, really good, as we've just discussed. So with the old format, you could have 80 people would qualify for a final. So the difference between the first place guy and the 80th place guy, as you can imagine, was quite a large window. And if we're all being honest and realistic, the guy in 80th place was never really going to win a World Cup, would have been the argument. Where it's gotten really difficult is the feeder series. So they've come in and they've changed the structure of the race. So you now qualify, there's fewer entries initially. So before you could have like 280 odd people could enter a World Cup race. So you have to get all of those 280 people down the hill on one day to do a qualifying to get your top 80. It took so long. You had a bit of a gnarly track, or it was a wee bit windy, red flags, waiting for helicopters. It's just a really long process. You had to set them off in 30-second gaps. So really, the riders were complaining because there was too much traffic on the track. The tracks were getting absolutely knackered. The live feed window was too long. So it all came down to we need to get rid of some riders. So they did, and they went straight to the problem with a solution. We'll just cut it down. We'll make less entries, and now we have a qualifier which gets 60 through, and now we'll add in an additional race which is a semi-final. So that takes your 60 down to 30, and those 30 guys are the guys that you'll watch on a Sunday, and everybody else goes home. So a lot of the arguments are that you might turn up and only get to ride your bike like 6 runs down a World Cup track, and then you're packing a bike up and you're going home. And obviously same in motocross, those privateer dudes that are just driving lengths and lengths and lengths of the country, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars just to try and be in the night show, and most of the time they're standing in the stands watching it. Like it's brutal, but that's kind of the reality of it. So that obviously upset a lot of people in the sport. And then it changed again last year. They changed the poles, which was really good. We used to have tape line tracks, and now they're like little short ski poles. So visually for the sponsors, I mean, that's really what they've charged that hard is visually making the sport more professional and getting branding banners everywhere, getting all the branding right, so that when it's on the TV, it looks like somebody's really thought about it. It's not just a bunch of idiot mountain bikers sending themselves off the hill with people screaming, because it's more methodical than that. It is a professional sport with some really intelligent people and brands behind it. So that's really fundamentally cutting the field. If we want to get into Jace, that's what pissed everybody off. Like there's not that many race series right now. So there used to be an IXS. Our national series in the UK really hasn't been great recently. Over the last 2 years, there's a lot of people really trying hard to get that back to what it was. So the argument is, if you only have 30 guys in the final now and only 60 can qualify, how do these young riders that maybe aren't just excelling in a junior, that are more like a Dungey the Diesel, they need a few years. They need to just peck away. They might be a slow boiler. I guess Cooper Webb was a similar example, right? He wasn't like the young kid that was wiping the floor of everybody. He was the guy in second or third that needed those extra years to get himself to where he needed to be. So now the big question is, I guess they've started the Continental Series, which is going to be the tier down from downhills. But that's what caused the problems in the first 2-3 years, was because they didn't have the Continental Series. They had to start at the top and then work their way down. Whereas a lot of people said, well, it makes more sense to build the feeder series first and put the money in there to then get it to the final, if you know what I mean. But if I'm an investor and the show is going to be on the TV next year, then that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to make sure that show looks good, because as of March, we're going to have people tuning in and viewing this. If we've bought it and it's got our name on it, we need that to look good. So of course that's where they were going to start. And I think fundamentally it's right. It's what the sport needed. Somebody used an example to me. You don't just see some guy pulling up at the back of the row in a Peugeot 206 going, hey, I fancied a shot of the World Cup this weekend. Let's see if I can beat Max Verstappen. It's like you don't have that. And the sport's never had a structure. I guess that's the problem. We've never had a very good point system that really can evaluate where a rider is, because we lose our points every year. And if you get injured for a year or two, I went down to like 132nd in the UCI standings. So if you went onto the website that year, you'd look at me and go, well, he's useless. He's 132nd.
Washed.
How's he ever going to get in the top 30? You're done. You know, I'm not going to get an offer. And then with the way that it was coming into this year, which has again cut quite a few riders out of it if they've had a bad year, if they've been injured, they've given the riders the points, which has never really happened. So when I ended this year, I missed 2 races. Actually, I think I didn't qualify in Poland. I had a nightmare, and then missed Val di Sole. So I missed 2 races technically. So I have quite few points. But because I own the points, the teams now have to purchase the points because they've given the teams a kind of maximum amount of points that they would need in order to be in the top 15 team overall. So what's happened this winter, which has never really happened in our sport before, is become a massive rider market. And it's been like an absolute panic for all of these big teams to get the rider with the most amount of points as quick as possible. But that created this massive problem where the riders with points knew this and they played the companies back and forward, just building up the money. And as more of them got snapped up, the ones that were left got more and more valuable. And teams have ended up overpaying a lot of money for not just average riders, but they're trying to buy the points. But from now on, that goes back to the teams owning the points. So now the riders that will be racing for our team, AON Racing, the points will go to the team so that the riders, I guess you could look at it 2 ways. The riders have less value. I think it'll go back to the same value. It's maybe less value that they've had this year, but this year was an anomaly. Like that shouldn't have happened. You know, it was, if you were in a contract year this year, you were a very happy man if you were coming off a good race season. And same for the females as well, because the elite females had the same points as the elite males. So everybody was worth a lot of money, and the companies knew what they were doing, going around offering just everybody that was available, offer them a contract and wait and see who comes back to you, offer them another one and wait. Even if they had no intentions of getting them, they were just trying to price people out of it. It was hectic. But what that's now done is given us a field right now that'll turn up to World Cup round 1 and anybody can win it. Top 30 guys. You know, some guys might have not had a great season last year, but if they're fit this year, anybody in that top 30 can win the race. And that is the truth. That is an honest reality of downhill mountain biking at the minute with how fine the margins are. So it's leveled the playing field now, and it's kind of separated the wheat from the chaff, I guess you could say. And the guys that just need a bit more time, they need more experience on World Cup level tracks on a different series. They need to earn their, what's the word? God, it's blowing my experience.
Earn their stock, you know. Yeah.
Exactly. They need to earn their experience and show their worth, and then they will get a ride in World Cup downhill. So it's changed massively. That's huge change for us, but it's the right change, and it's painful. Change hurts sometimes, and we have had to kind of quite abruptly cut the bottom of the field off, but it's to benefit the top half, and we believe, and that's the model here, that if you benefit the top half, you get that better and more exciting. Maybe we can get to gnarlier tracks, we can start building bigger jumps, we can make it more exciting because those top 30 dudes you know are good and you know they're solid, and then the money in the industry hopefully will trickle down to everybody else, and again the whole sport rises is the hope, you know.
Mate, I love it. I haven't really followed it close enough to where I really could have an opinion one way or the other. But I don't know if you've heard my rants about privateers, but there should be no C practice and there should be no B practice. Like the analogy that I would use is if the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets are playing a game of basketball at Madison Square Garden and there's 5 players on each team, they're not going and getting 2 from the fucking half court in the Bronx.
Yeah.
We know who's playing on those teams. We know who's playing on those teams at night. Like, I don't need to find out randomly of a dude that isn't actually a professional basketball player. I don't need to find a space for that guy in that. In MotoGP, we're not saving 5 spots for dudes that are plumbers. And it's like, I get it. It's the dream. It's everyone's dream to race Supercross. I would have loved to race Supercross. Guess what? I'm just not that good enough. And there should be there should be a window that you need to be in to be a professional athlete competing at the highest level of the sport. Now, that only works if there's a system in place for you to get there, right? And so it sounds like now with the Continental Series, and then as well with this Monster Downhill Series in the US, like you have a national downhill series. So if you live in Europe, do the Conti Series. If you live in the US, do the Monster National Series. Like, there should be avenues, and the sport should be set up in a way where that is the case. And you can't have that if everyone can be like, well, fuck, they take 280 entries. I'll just go do the World Cup. No, bro. No.
Well,
that's not how this works.
Yeah, that is it in a nutshell, really. There's a saying, if everybody's special, nobody's special. And that's the same thing as well. It's like you can't, we are quite special because we're really, really good at what we do, and we deserve a platform to exceed and excel on, of show people that come and pay the money to see that race from the sidelines. They deserve a show as well, and they don't really want to stand on a hillside waiting 2 hours whilst these kind of random guys that they don't know, like you say, Plumber Steve for down the road is just giving it a shot. It's like, like you say, it is really cool, but there comes a point where Plumber Steve has to look at himself in the face and go, it's not happening today,
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree
and that's,
more. Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly,
that is kind of where we're at right now. It's like, yeah, the world's also, it's gone very, very soft, as we know. So the truth is, life's not fair, and if you are in one of those, if you are in a position where you're between 30th and 60th right now, life seems very, very unfair, but there are opportunities out there. And if you are one of the fastest guys in the world on a mountain bike and you've got a mobile phone, you can make the opportunities to get yourself to where you need to be. Like, without a doubt, it's like we've all been there and we've all done it. There's so many people, hundreds of people in sport all over the world that come from an impossible background and come through and achieve what they want to achieve, And for sure, there's as many stories out there that are negative in the sense that somebody that maybe could have and should have that didn't. And that's just life. That really is just life. But the sport needed a cleanup. It needed a trim. It needed a tidy up around the edges in order to pack it into a nice, solid, professional-looking and controllable package for a hillside. There's so many elements of mountain biking. You're outside, lightning, chairlifts. Like, there's so much that you can't control. So at very least, let's control how many riders are going to turn up here. How many spectators are we going to get? Can we house everybody? Like, there's important things that need to be in place, and that is all they've done. They've just had to come in and clean it up, and it's been really tough for the sport to watch, but it needed to happen. And I think going forward, we'll start to see the benefits of it pretty soon.
I always use the analogy too that the ceiling is relative to the floor. And it's like you can't build a building with a 5,000 meter high ceiling. Like, it's just that you can't have that much gap between the foundation of the thing and the peak of the thing, right? So it's like you need to lift the floor. Like, you have to bring up the lowest level to make the highest level higher, and people just lose sight of that. Like, we just don't live in this perfect world where everyone wins. And I'm not watching downhill, or I'm not watching Supercross. Like, I don't give a fuck, like, as a fan. And it sounds so harsh to say that, but I just don't give a fuck about the 21st best dude in the world at racing Supercross. Like, I don't even watch from 15th down. There's definitely an argument to be made that you need 20 guys on the gate to, like, make it. There's, like, an atmospheric exception that you need to make. Like, MotoGP, you need 20 guys to have the sound and to have the, like, there needs to be a certain thickness, but there is a point of diminishing returns, and it's like, if we're being honest, I don't give a fuck about the bottom 5 of the best 20 guys in the world. That's just the reality of sport. Like, we're watching this to find out who is the freak of all freaks.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And I know, being a fan of other sports, you don't just stumble across, unless you know him personally, maybe you don't just stumble across the guy that's 30th or 40th in the world and follow him to see what he does in his sport. You go straight to the number one guy, obviously, and see what it's like from their perspective, and you follow their journey most of the time. So I'm very aware that that's also how people view our sport. It's like I'm lucky to be, and I've worked really hard to become one of the top 10 guys in the sport that does have a really big following and does have a lot of influence. But it isn't like that for everybody, and it took me a long time to get myself to that point, and worked really hard on Instagram I didn't just sit with my legs crossed and it happened for me. I was aware that when Instagram started, this is going to be needed. Like, you'll need this for sponsorship in the future, and worked super, super hard for it. And the fan base, probably 90% of my followers have never met me in person. All they consume is my content on the internet. So how our sport looks on the internet for those people to tune in and watch is really, really, really important. And I do think it's getting more professional. And this is all for a good thing. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. People want to see mad shit on bikes, and that normally comes from the top 10 guys. It's a little bit harder in our sport because the talent is so deep, and the results never really resemble.
You guys have more. Yeah, you guys have more, which is cool. Like, just find the sweet spot.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for us is the fact you're on a mountain. You're trying to get one guy, so it takes me like 4 minutes to do a lap, but we need to have 3-minute gaps for the TV because it takes me 4 minutes to get down, so that next guy can't drop in. There's a lot of logistical problems that come with trying to document downhill mountain biking on a mountainside that people don't really consider. It's actually much closer coverage-wise to rallying, with your stages and almost needing a helicopter, and obviously they're experimenting a lot with drones at the moment, and it's really difficult to cover that, and the live TV slot costs an eye-watering amount of money, and a lot of people don't realise that either. So you need to compress the show, and that is probably one of the number one reasons. It's like, you can't just have a 2-hour-long live TV slot without paying hundreds of thousands. Like, you need to shrink that down. And like you say, if the fans only want to see the top 30 guys, well, I'm afraid to say, if you're not in the top 30, it's, keep trying. You might just get there, but for right now, you're not there, and the harsh reality of it.
Yeah, and I think too, though, the thing that people forget, right, is would you rather be the dude that gets 31st at a World Cup, or the guy that wins the Continental Series?
Well, exactly. To me, the guy that wins the Continental Series, because everybody's looking at him as the next World Cup guy. It looks a lot better than the last World Cup guy, undoubtedly. It gives you more confidence. Losing every single weekend drives you down. It gets to you. You're better to be in an environment where it's not easy to win, but to win for as long as possible until you have to move up. Because a winning environment is a much better place to develop an athlete than in a losing environment, So I absolutely agree with that as well. You're bang on.
And people would want to watch it because he's in all, like, if you don't have him on the hill next to Loic Bruni, the dude looks like a fucking animal, which is the same as, like in the motocross or supercross, like you watch the pulp race. I mean, it's probably a bit different in motocross. Like, the talent does drop off a bit, but you can watch, like, Josh Hill won the race last time. I still want to watch Josh Hill race. If he's the dude that's going to win the race, like, I want to watch him win a race. But it's like, if he's getting 21st and Eli Tomac and Jet Lawrence are battling for the win, I'm watching that part of the race. So I think, like, again, as long as there's an opportunity for these other series where you can be the winning guy, there will be fans that will want to watch you win those races. And that's way better than being the 31st guy where you're basically someone's piss break in a broadcast.
Exactly. That is exactly it. And that is that is where the sport is going, and you obviously agree it's the right thing. I do believe that as a model is the right way to do it. So yeah, that's to me is let's go with that. Let's be positive about it, and let's make some change and try and help the sport grow, because it can only be a good thing, in my opinion. And I think when those other series are here and they're booming and all that stuff's doing really well, I think people will look back on this just like 29er wheels and go, actually, that was pretty good, glad we done that. And that's what I'm hoping for.
And as far as like the money, has any of the money from the Warner Brothers investment like directly hit the riders?
I wouldn't say so. No, I've not noticed that. Obviously, I'm on a different program this year, changing to my own team now. I have to pay myself, so it's kind of nice in a way, to be honest. Yeah, broke AF. That's it's nice. At least I only have to argue with myself when I want more money. But like I say, the riders got if you were available and you had good points, you had a good season last year, you were making good money this year. This is probably one of the best years you'll ever have in downhill mountain biking. But normally really no, I wouldn't say we have yet noticed, but it's only been 3 years, maybe 3. It's not a long time out of, I think, a 7-year contract. So we're not even really we're just approaching the halfway mark. So I'm really hoping that this is now we're going to start to see it, and hopefully they can vocalize and actually publicize the extra viewing figures that we are getting. But like I say, I've walked into multiple places in Europe now on a Sunday, and Eurosport or BT Sport or TNT's been on the TV, and our sport has been on the telly, and I think that in itself is massive, and we should all be embracing that and enjoying that part of it. And the subscription fee is obviously, what it's like when you put things behind paywalls, it really pees the core audience off. But if you're getting a good show, then I think people will be okay with that as well.
Yeah, and then I think it's just like from a business standpoint, like there's just a way that the world is now, and it's like we're in this attention economy, and if you have attention metrics, then it's kind of just like up to you to leverage that. I mean, that's literally my job. Like we got 1 million hours of watch time this month on YouTube, and it's like, how do I leverage that? How do I get people to pay me for that? And like you said, you got the viewership and you got those numbers, so it's kind of just on you guys to leverage that as athletes and teams. And
absolutely, yeah. I mean, if we can, at the end of the day, if we can get more money coming in, that kind of comes from all those views as well. But if we can get more money coming in, then that subscription fee could, in theory, drop maybe in the future. Of course, it might increase, but if our sport could get a massive title sponsor that could walk in with, 10 million a year or something, the sport would absolutely change. Like, it would change massively. The guys that are in charge of it now know how to change this sport and know how to make it good, but there's a lot of limiting factors, and we have the UCI cycling as well as the venues as well. So you've got 3 parties all trying to create one event, and it can be really difficult, because if one of those parties don't agree with something, then you're ahead, and they kind of have arguments. And I kind of know a bit from both sides of it this year from last year, that's been the hardest challenge. It's like trying to get these 3 parties to link up and all be willing to make the same change so that they can step forward as one. Whereas some people are coming up with ideas and these guys aren't ready for that change. And there's definitely politics involved. And where there's big money, there is politics. That's, again, just life, such is life. But yeah, it's I genuinely wholeheartedly believe that it's going to be better, and I don't think I've noticed any decrease in the last 2 or 3 years to the response I'm getting online, people watching the races, sponsorship money. I mean, we've just managed to start a race team from scratch, and we have enough budget to take 6 professional athletes around the world with 6 or 7 additional staff members, and we've kind of done it out of the blue, but it's probably going to be over 1 million. And it is what it is. We do it for the love of doing it. None of us are here for the money, really. It'd be nice to make money and not lose it, but we're doing it because we fucking love racing bikes, and the fans are tuning in because they love watching racing bikes, and that's what it should be remembered as. Fundamentally, we're entertainment, and let's entertain. Let's give the people a show.
Man, I love it, dude. This has been awesome. you're one of my favorite riders, and I've loved watching your career over the last few years. There's so much other stuff that we could talk about as well. So we might have to schedule a part two, maybe even towards the end of the racing season, or once you get the first year under your belt. But dude, unreal. I honestly can't wait to follow along with the journey.
I'm honestly so buzzing. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, the next one should definitely be in person. Pretty keen to come over there and see what life's like on the other side of the Gypsy screen. So yeah, definitely massive thanks for having me, and for sure, yeah, everybody following along, please, support helps obviously all the time. So follow us up, follow AON Racing. You'll keep everything. We'll keep everything updated there, and yeah, share your love for the sport. It goes a long way, and I'll be doing for the same for motocross. I'll be tuning in hardcore every week. But no, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, dude, I'm gonna try and get to a World Cup this year. I got to try and figure out some travel plans. But and yeah, definitely, I'm trying to. We've got like the mountain bike Instagram. I'm trying to, sort of slowly trying to get in, but it's not an easy job with most of you guys being that side of the world. But yeah, dude, this has been awesome. So I really appreciate you.
Mega. I look forward to the next one. Thank you very, very much. Thanks, guys.
If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. And to listen to the full 3-hour podcast, search Gypsy Tales in your favorite podcast platform or click the link in the description below. Gypsy Gang.